The screech of metal tore through the underground station as the subway roared into view. Commuters shuffled along the yellow line, lost in their own worlds, clutching coffee cups and bags of groceries. The air was thick with that familiar mix of oil, sweat, and the faint echo of street musicians playing somewhere above. And then, in one terrifying instant, everything shattered. Emily Tran, 6 months pregnant, stood near the edge of the platform with her husband, Damien. Her hands rested protectively on her swollen belly, her eyes tired but still filled with hope that maybe, just maybe, the man beside her could change. For months, Damien had grown colder, crueler, whispering to his mistress on late-night calls, snapping at Emily for being weak and useless. But tonight, he had insisted they go out. She thought maybe it was a step toward reconciliation. She was wrong. Damien's jaw tightened as the headlights of the approaching train lit up the tunnel. His eyes, once warm and charming, now burned with something darker: impatience, disgust, and a chilling resolve. Leaning close, he hissed words only Emily could hear. "You've been nothing but a burden. Tonight, it ends." Before she could even gasp, his hand slammed into her shoulder with brutal force. The world flipped upside down. Emily's scream sliced through the crowded platform as her body toppled forward, weightless for a split second, before she hit the gravel bed of the tracks. Pain exploded through her leg as the train's horn blared. The crowd erupted in chaos, shouts, gasps, frantic pointing fingers. Blood spread across the concrete like spilled paint. "Help her! Someone help her!" a woman shrieked, her voice breaking. The train was seconds away. Sparks lit the tunnel as brakes screeched, but there was no time. Emily clawed at the rails, her nails breaking, tears blinding her. She thought of her baby, the tiny heartbeat she'd heard during checkups, the promise of a future she still dreamed of. "Please, not like this," she whispered through clenched teeth. In that horrifying blur, her left leg twisted under the weight of steel. A sickening crunch echoed, followed by a scream that seemed to silence the entire station. Blood gushed, soaking her dress, pooling beneath her. Strangers covered their mouths, children cried, phones recorded the nightmare. Emily's vision dimmed, her ears ringing, but inside her belly, she felt it. Her baby kicked. Still alive. Still fighting. Just when the shadows threatened to swallow her, a pair of strong hands reached down from above. A man's voice, firm and steady, cut through the panic. "Hold on. Don't let go." His suit jacket brushed against the dirt as he leaned dangerously close to the rails. His grip locked onto her arm with the kind of strength that refused to surrender. The train thundered past, sparks flying, the gust of wind nearly tearing him off balance. Emily's body convulsed in pain, her leg mangled, her dress drenched in red. She tried to focus on the face above her. Sharp jawline, kind but determined eyes, a stranger who felt like hope itself. Her lips trembled, her breath shallow. The last thing she heard before slipping into unconsciousness was his voice, trembling with urgency. "You're safe now. I've got you." Long before the blood and the chaos at the subway station, Emily Tran had believed her life was a fairy tale. At 29, she carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who found joy in the simplest things. A teacher at a neighborhood elementary school in Queens, she was adored by her students, who clung to her like a second mother. She had no designer wardrobe, no family fortune, no glamorous circle of friends. What she did have was a heart full of kindness, a determination to work hard, and the dream of raising a child in a loving home. When Emily first met Damien Tran 7 years earlier, she thought fate had finally rewarded her. He was everything she wasn't: confident, wealthy, and magnetic. He owned property across the city, drove sleek cars, and carried the aura of a man who could bend the world to his will. Damien swept her off her feet with extravagant gestures. Lavish dinners, roses arriving at her school, promises whispered beneath glittering city lights. For a girl raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a seamstress, the attention felt intoxicating. Her friends warned her. They told her Damien was too good to be true, that men with money often loved control more than people. But Emily, blinded by the fantasy, clung to the belief that love could change even the hardest heart. Within a year, she was married. Within 2, she was dreaming of children, imagining a cozy home filled with laughter and warmth. At first, their marriage glowed. Damien showed up at her classroom with coffee, teased her gently when she fell asleep grading papers, and held her hand during long walks in Central Park. She told herself she had beaten the odds. She wasn't just a schoolteacher married to a millionaire. She was proof that love transcended class, background, and status. But as years passed, shadows crept in. Damien's business empire expanded, and with it his arrogance. He stopped asking about her day. He began criticizing the way she dressed, the way she ate, even the way she spoke. At first, Emily brushed it off, convincing herself that stress was making him harsh. But deep down, she knew the man she had married was slipping away. When she discovered she was pregnant, her heart leapt with joy. For a brief moment, Damien seemed thrilled too. He told her he would be a father their child could look up to. He even kissed her stomach and whispered promises of building a future together. Emily clung to those moments, desperate to believe he meant them. Yet the reality was crueler. Damien grew distant, staying out late, making excuses about business dinners. Emily smelled perfume on his suits. Perfume that wasn't hers. She found suspicious credit card charges at luxury boutiques she had never set foot in. When she confronted him, he dismissed her, accusing her of being paranoid. "You should focus on your pregnancy," he snapped. "Leave business to men who understand it." Alone in their penthouse, Emily often pressed her hands against her belly, whispering to her unborn child that everything would be okay. She didn't care about wealth or status. She only wanted love, stability, and safety for her baby. She still prayed Damien would change. But deep inside, she felt the growing chill of a storm she could no longer control. And soon, that storm would break in the most brutal way imaginable. And that night at the subway, it finally did. To the outside world, Damien Tran was the definition of success. At 37, he was the kind of man who drew attention the second he entered a room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sleek black hair and a tailored suit that hugged his frame like it had been cut from ambition itself, Damien carried the aura of a conqueror. Reporters called him a self-made real estate king. Investors praised his ruthless instincts. Young entrepreneurs idolized his story of climbing from nothing to everything. But those who looked closer, those who dared, could see cracks beneath the polished surface. Damien had built his empire on charm, manipulation, and fear. He was the type of man who smiled warmly for cameras, then shredded his employees behind closed doors. The boardroom was his battlefield, and his opponents rarely left unscathed. He thrived on control, on bending people until they broke, then discarding them like old receipts. When Emily first met him, she saw only the charm. Damien knew how to sell himself, not just to investors, but to anyone he wanted. He wooed her with grand gestures because he understood her innocence, her desire for love. For Damien, it wasn't just about attraction, it was about power. Having a humble schoolteacher on his arm was proof that he could claim anything, anyone, regardless of background. It made him feel invincible. As his fortune grew, so did his hunger. Luxury became his language. A new penthouse overlooking Central Park, imported cars with custom interiors, vacations on private yachts. Each possession fed his ego, but nothing ever satisfied him. Emily, once a jewel he flaunted proudly, began to bore him. She didn't understand the thrill of high-stakes deals, the intoxicating power of being envied. To him, her kindness became weakness, her modesty became shame. He never said it outright at first, but his disdain slipped through in barbed comments. "You should dress better if you're going to be seen with me. Maybe if you earned more, you'd understand the value of money. Stop eating so much. You don't want to embarrass me at events." Each insult chipped away at Emily, but Damien delivered them with a casual cruelty that made them sound like truths rather than attacks. Behind Emily's back, Damien had already moved on. Roxanne, a 25-year-old intern at his firm, was everything Emily wasn't: glamorous, ambitious, eager to please. She clung to Damien's side at business functions, laughing at his jokes, fueling his ego with every glance of admiration. With Roxanne, Damien felt younger, more powerful, like a man still climbing, rather than one weighed down by responsibility. But it wasn't enough to cheat. Damien wanted freedom. Freedom from Emily, from fatherhood, from the domestic life he had once pretended to cherish. In his mind, Emily's pregnancy wasn't a blessing. It was a chain that threatened to trap him in a role he despised. And Damien Tran was not a man who tolerated chains. As his obsession with Roxanne deepened, his contempt for Emily grew unbearable. He started plotting in silence, searching for a way to rid himself of the burden without tarnishing his reputation. And when the moment came on that subway platform, Damien didn't hesitate. He pushed. What he didn't expect was that fate had already chosen a witness who would change everything. At first, Emily tried to ignore the unease gnawing at her heart. She told herself that Damien was stressed, that the late nights and sharp words were temporary, that once the baby arrived, things would change. But denial could only hold back reality for so long. The signs of betrayal were everywhere, carved into her days like cruel reminders that the man she loved was slipping further away. It began with the small lies. Damien would tell her he had urgent meetings, yet Emily would find receipts from luxury restaurants tucked into his suit pockets, meals for two, not one. She discovered lipstick smudges on his collars, faint but undeniable, shades she never wore. Once, when she reached for his phone, Damien snatched it away with such ferocity that her hands shook for hours afterward. The emotional abuse grew sharper with each passing week. "Why are you still wearing those cheap clothes?" he sneered one evening, glancing at her modest maternity dress. "Do you want people to think I can't provide for my wife?" Another time, when she gently reminded him of her prenatal appointment, he rolled his eyes. "You're so needy, Emily. All you do is complain. No wonder I stay late at work." Her heart cracked, but she stayed silent. She told herself she had to be strong for the baby, that confronting him would only make things worse. But silence became suffocating. Emily started crying quietly at night, muffling her sobs into pillows so Damien wouldn't hear, or worse, mock her for them. Then came the cruelest blow. Emily walked into Damien's office one afternoon to surprise him with lunch, her belly leading the way, her hands full of his favorite food. The secretary froze, her face pale, as if she had been guarding a secret. Emily pushed open the door and saw her husband leaning close to Roxanne, his hand brushing against the young woman's arm, their smiles too intimate to be professional. Roxanne's perfume lingered in the air like poison. "Emily," Damien said flatly, as though caught in nothing more than a boring meeting, "you shouldn't be here." Her heart collapsed inside her chest. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words died on her tongue. She looked at Roxanne, who smirked ever so slightly, as if daring Emily to challenge her. The humiliation was unbearable. Without a word, Emily placed the lunch on his desk, her hands trembling, and walked out. That night, Damien didn't bother coming home until dawn. When he finally did, he smelled of cologne and champagne. "Don't start," he muttered when Emily tried to ask where he had been. "You're lucky I keep a roof over your head. Stop acting like some abandoned housewife." Those words cut deeper than any knife. For the first time, Emily began to understand the truth. Damien didn't just stop loving her, he despised her. And in his eyes, their baby wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. Still, Emily whispered to her unborn child as she lay awake in the dark, "I'll protect you, no matter what, even if I have to face this storm alone." She had no idea how violent that storm was about to become. The night of their wedding anniversary was supposed to be a celebration. Emily had circled the date on her calendar, clinging to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, Damien would remember the promises he had once whispered to her under the glow of city lights. She bought a soft blue dress, nothing extravagant, just elegant enough to make her feel like the woman she used to be. She imagined walking into a candlelit dinner, Damien smiling, perhaps even apologizing for his recent cruelty. Instead, she was left sitting alone in their penthouse, staring at the clock as hours bled away. The dinner reservation she had made sat unused. The flowers she had placed on the table wilted in silence. At nearly midnight, Damien returned, not with an apology, but with a smirk. "You should have known I had business tonight," he said dismissively. "Don't act like a child." He didn't even look at her belly, didn't even acknowledge the life they had created together. The next morning, Emily saw the photographs online. Damien had attended the city's most exclusive charity gala, an event where the wealthy gathered under chandeliers worth more than Emily's annual salary. But the worst wasn't that he went without her. The worst was who he chose to bring. Roxanne. There she was, glittering in a crimson gown, her hand curled possessively around Damien's arm. They looked like royalty, laughing as camera flashes immortalized their intimacy. The articles praised them as a striking pair, whispering about a possible engagement. Emily's stomach turned as she scrolled through the images, her trembling hand resting over her unborn child. She could almost hear the whispers of society. The millionaire's wife, replaced, discarded, humiliated. When Damien returned home the next day, Emily confronted him. "How could you?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry the weight of her heartbreak. "How could you take her to a gala on our anniversary?" Damien barely glanced at her. "Don't be dramatic. You wouldn't have fit in anyway. You're swollen, exhausted, always complaining. Roxanne knows how to carry herself. She doesn't embarrass me." The words hit Emily like daggers. She pressed a hand to her belly, as if shielding her baby from the venom. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. "I loved you," she whispered. "I gave you everything." Damien laughed coldly. "And what did I get in return? A nagging wife and a pregnancy I never wanted. Be grateful I let you stay in this house." Emily turned away, unable to bear the sight of him. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just unloved. She was despised. Her marriage wasn't simply broken. It was a cage, and Damien was tightening the bars every day. That night, as she lay awake, Emily felt her baby kick, a tiny reminder that life still beat inside her. She kissed her stomach and made a silent vow. "I'll endure this pain for you, but one day he will pay." She didn't know that payment would come sooner than anyone expected. The night was cold, the kind of biting chill that seeped into bones and made even the brightest lights of the city seem dimmer. Emily walked beside Damien, her steps unsteady, her hand resting on her swollen belly. She didn't understand why he had insisted they take the subway instead of the chauffeured car waiting outside their building. He had barked something about being in a hurry, but his jaw was clenched too tightly, his fists shoved too deep into his pockets for her to believe it. The platform was crowded, alive with the restless energy of New Yorkers rushing home. The rumble of an approaching train echoed in the tunnel, the vibration rattling the tiles under Emily's feet. She tried to keep her balance, holding the railing for support. Her pregnancy made her body heavy, her legs tired, and Damien offered no hand, no word of care. He strode ahead, his pace sharp, almost impatient, as if her very existence was slowing him down. "Damien," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, can we just go home? I'm exhausted. The baby." "The baby?" He cut her off with a bitter laugh, turning to glare at her. His voice was low, dangerous, carrying the venom he no longer bothered to hide. "That's all I hear from you. The baby this, the baby that. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I ever wanted to be chained to a crying brat and a wife who looks like she crawled out of a bargain store?" Emily's heart cracked. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "How can you say that? This is our child. Flesh and blood. Damien, please." But his face was a mask of hatred, twisted by years of contempt. He leaned in close, his whisper slicing through the noise of the platform. "You ruined me, Emily. Do you hear me? You ruined everything. I could have had freedom, power. Roxanne understands me. You're just a burden." The words cut deeper than any blade. Emily stepped back instinctively, clutching her belly, her body trembling with fear. The train's headlights appeared in the tunnel, a blinding glow that grew larger with each passing second. The crowd shifted closer to the yellow line, eager to board. Emily tried to move away, but Damien's hand clamped around her arm, his grip iron, his eyes burning with something terrifying. "Damien, you're hurting me," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "Please, not here. Not now." The roar of the train grew deafening. The ground shook. Emily's breath quickened, her pulse pounding in her ears. She tried to pull free, but his grip tightened. "I should have gotten rid of you a long time ago," he spat. "Tonight, I will." Her stomach lurched. She gasped, her eyes wide with horror. Around them, the crowd laughed, shouted, oblivious to the war unfolding between husband and wife. The train surged closer, its brakes screeching, sparks flying as it tore through the tunnel. Damien shoved her toward the edge, his strength merciless. Emily's scream pierced the air as her body stumbled forward. And then, in that split second before the train swallowed her, everything changed. The world spun as Emily fell forward, her scream ripping through the underground station. The force of Damien's shove sent her sprawling onto the tracks, gravel tearing at her skin as the deafening roar of the subway thundered closer. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to freeze. The gasps of bystanders, the flicker of horror on strangers' faces, the blinding light of the train bearing down on her. Emily's body hit the ground hard. She twisted, instinctively shielding her stomach with her arms. Her mind wasn't on herself. It was on the tiny life kicking inside her, desperate to survive. "Please," she whispered through trembling lips, though her plea was drowned out by the screeching brakes and metal grinding against metal. And then it happened. The train clipped her leg, crushing bone and flesh in a single merciless strike. The sound was sickening, a crack followed by a gush of blood that spread across the tracks like a crimson river. Emily's scream was so raw, so piercing, that the entire platform seemed to fall silent. Mothers covered their children's eyes, grown men turned away, and still the blood poured, pooling beneath her like a horrific painting. Emily clawed at the rails, her nails breaking, her face pale and drenched in sweat. Pain like fire shot through her body, but through it all she felt the faint, miraculous kick inside her womb. Her baby was still alive. That knowledge became her anchor, her reason to cling to consciousness as darkness threatened to pull her under. Above her, chaos erupted. "Call 911, someone shouted. "Get her out of there." Another voice, panicked and helpless, cried, "She's losing too much blood." Dozens of phones pointed down, some recording, others shaking as desperate fingers dialed for help. Damien stood frozen on the platform, his face a mask of shock. For once, his arrogance deserted him. He glanced around, realizing that dozens of witnesses had seen what he had done. His lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. He slowly backed into the crowd, trying to disappear into the chaos, but it was too late. Eyes were on him, and whispers had already begun. And then, from the blur of screaming voices and flashing lights, one man acted. He wasn't just any man. He wore a navy suit that now brushed against the filthy platform tiles as he threw himself to the ground. His strong hands reached down, his voice booming with authority. "Grab my arm. Don't you dare let go." Emily blinked through the haze of pain, her vision swimming. A face came into focus. Sharp jawline, steady eyes filled not with pity, but with determination. He radiated calm in the storm, his grip firm and unyielding. She clung to him with the last of her strength. The train shuddered to a stop, sparks flying, smoke rising in the tunnel. The stranger pulled with all his might, muscles straining, refusing to surrender her to death. Inch by inch, Emily's broken body lifted from the blood-soaked tracks. The crowd roared encouragement, a chorus of voices willing her to survive. As her body collapsed onto the platform, her head rested against the stranger's chest. Her eyes fluttered, her lips moving weakly. "You're safe now?" he whispered, his voice trembling but certain. And just before darkness swallowed her, Emily realized this man had just changed her life forever. The beeping of machines was the first sound Emily heard. Slow, steady, relentless, like the faint reminder that she was still tethered to life. The smell of antiseptic filled her lungs, sharp and sterile, so different from the chaos of the subway. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy as stone, and she found herself in a white hospital room. The lights dimmed, the curtains pulled halfway shut against the night. For a moment she couldn't remember. Then it hit her, the shove, the scream, the blood, the agony that tore her apart. She gasped, panic flooding her chest as her hands flew to her stomach. Was the baby? A nurse rushed to her side, pressing a gentle hand against hers. "Your baby's alive," she said softly. "Strong heartbeat. You saved them." Relief crashed over Emily, tears streaming down her cheeks. But just as quickly, another realization sank in. She tried to move her legs. One responded weakly. The other? Nothing. She forced her gaze downward and her heart shattered into pieces. The space where her left leg should have been was gone, replaced by bandages, tubes, and the harsh reality of survival. She let out a cry so raw, so broken that even the nurse had to look away. "No, no, God, no." Her hands shook violently as she covered her face, the weight of it crushing her spirit. She had survived, but she wasn't whole anymore. As her sobs echoed in the room, a deep voice spoke from the corner. "You are whole, Emily. You're alive, and your child is alive. That's what matters." Her head snapped up. The man from the subway stood there, his navy suit now wrinkled, his tie loosened, but his presence steady and commanding. His eyes carried both exhaustion and something else, something fierce, protective. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved me," he nodded, stepping closer. "Alexander Blackwell, I couldn't stand by and watch. You fought harder than anyone I've ever seen." Emily shook her head, her tears soaking the pillow. "I lost my leg. I'll never be the same. Damien, She choked on the name, unable to say more. Alexander's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "I saw what he did. Everyone did. There were witnesses, cameras. He won't get away with this, not this time." His voice was steady, but beneath it lay a promise, a vow of justice. The nurse adjusted Emily's IV and quietly slipped out, leaving them alone. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of machines and Emily's uneven breaths. She turned her face toward Alexander, her eyes filled with both gratitude and despair. "Why are you still here?" she asked softly. "Because you need someone," he replied without hesitation. "And because no one deserves to fight alone. Not you, not your baby." Her chest tightened. For the first time in months, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Safety. The way Alexander looked at her wasn't with pity, it was with respect, with belief. Emily closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. She had lost so much, but maybe, just maybe, life had given her a second chance. And as Alexander stood by her side, she had no idea how much he was about to change her destiny. The hospital became both a refuge and a prison. Days blurred together in a haze of pain, medicine, and muffled sobs. Emily tried to be strong, but the reality of her loss clawed at her every waking moment. Each time she looked down at the empty space where her leg once was, grief tore through her like fresh glass, cutting skin. Physical therapy was brutal. The first time a nurse sat her up in bed, pain shot through her body so violently she nearly fainted. Sweat drenched her forehead as she tried to balance, her arms trembling from the effort. "You have to fight," the therapist encouraged gently. But Emily could barely hear her over the roaring in her ears. All she could think was, "I'm broken. I'm ruined. Damien has won." The nights were the worst. Alone in the dimly lit room, she would press her hands to her swollen belly and cry silently so the nurses wouldn't hear. She worried endlessly. What kind of mother could she be now? How could she protect her child when she couldn't even walk? And worse, what if Damien tried to take the baby from her? The thought made her chest tighten until she couldn't breathe. Yet through the shadows, one constant presence remained. Alexander Blackwell. He came every day, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with books, but always with quiet strength. He didn't push her to talk. He simply sat by her bed, reading the newspaper or answering emails, as if his presence alone was enough to remind her she wasn't alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the hospital walls in muted gold, Emily broke down. "Why are you wasting your time on me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Look at me. I'm nothing now. Damien destroyed me." Alexander leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You are not nothing. You survived something that would have killed most people. And you saved your child in the process. That makes you stronger than Damien will ever be." His words lodged deep in her heart. For the first time since the accident, she let herself believe maybe she wasn't ruined. Maybe she was still worth something. What Emily didn't know was that Alexander was doing more than sitting at her bedside. Behind the scenes, he was pulling strings, hiring private investigators, gathering evidence. The subway incident had been caught on surveillance cameras. Witnesses had already given statements. But Alexander wanted more. He wanted to expose every dirty secret Damien had buried, from financial fraud to the affair with Roxanne. Late at night, while Emily slept, Alexander met with lawyers and detectives. "This man tried to kill her," he said coldly. "I want everything. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. We're going to bury him with the truth." In her hospital room, Emily stirred in her sleep, unaware of the storm brewing outside. She clutched her belly, murmuring softly to the child growing inside her, as if promising them a better future. She didn't yet know that Alexander's vow was more than just justice. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that would shatter the chains Damien had forged around her life. And soon, Emily would rise from her darkest hours stronger than ever. The rain poured outside the hospital windows, streaking the glass like tears from the heavens. Emily sat upright in her bed, her face pale but her eyes sharper than before. She had endured days of agony, both physical and emotional, but a fire flickered quietly inside her now. Still, uncertainty gnawed at her. Damien was out there, free, untouchable. She knew him well enough to understand he wouldn't rest until he had erased her completely. That night, Alexander entered her room, not with flowers or gentle smiles, but with a folder in his hand. He closed the door behind him, his expression heavy with something he had been holding back. Emily looked up, her heart skipping at the unusual seriousness in his gaze. "Emily," he began, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "There's something you need to know. I didn't want to overwhelm you, but you deserve the truth." Her brows furrowed. "The truth?" He placed the folder on her lap. Inside were clippings from newspapers, photos of gala events, articles from Forbes, glossy covers of financial magazines. Each bore the same name, Alexander Blackwell. Emily blinked, stunned. This can't be." "It is," Alexander said softly. "I'm not just some man who happened to be at that station. I'm the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises. I've built hospitals, funded schools, invested billions into charities around the world. But money means nothing compared to this." He leaned forward, his voice dropping, steady and raw. "Compared to saving you, compared to making sure you and your child are safe." Her lips parted in disbelief. All this time, she had thought he was simply a kind stranger, a man with compassion. She never imagined he was one of the wealthiest men in the country. "Why? Why me?" she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "Because I saw something in you," Alexander said firmly. "The way you fought for your baby, even while bleeding on those tracks. The strength in your eyes when everyone else would have given up. That's real power, Emily. That's something money can't buy. And no man, certainly not Damien, has the right to break it." Emily's chest heaved, emotions swirling between gratitude, disbelief, and fear. "But Damien, he'll come for me. He won't stop until—" "Until what?" Alexander cut in, his eyes burning with resolve. "Until he silences you? Not anymore. I've already set lawyers in motion. I've secured a private team to protect you, and I will not rest until Damien Tran is stripped of everything he used to hurt you." For the first time since the accident, Emily felt the heavy chains of fear loosen. Alexander wasn't just offering comfort, he was offering armor. He was giving her a way to rise, to fight, to reclaim her dignity. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." Alexander shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. Don't give up. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning." Emily's hand drifted to her belly, feeling the faint kick of life inside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future. And with Alexander Blackwell at her side, that future would be nothing short of extraordinary. The first day of rehabilitation felt like stepping into another battlefield. Emily sat in the therapy room, her hospital gown replaced by soft athletic wear, her hair tied back, her face pale but determined. The physical therapist wheeled in a set of parallel bars, placing them in front of her. "Are you ready to try standing?" the therapist asked gently. Emily swallowed hard. She looked down at her bandaged stump, then at her swollen belly. The thought of standing, of walking again, felt impossible. But then she remembered Alexander's words. "Don't give up. Your story isn't over." Slowly she nodded. With trembling arms she gripped the bars. Sweat broke across her forehead as she shifted her weight, her muscles straining. For a moment her body refused. Then, inch by inch, she rose. The pain was excruciating, tears streaming down her cheeks, but when she finally stood upright on one leg, a flicker of triumph lit her eyes. Alexander was there, watching quietly from the corner of the room. He didn't cheer or clap. Instead, he simply smiled, his gaze steady and full of respect. "That's the strongest thing I've ever seen," he murmured. Day after day, Emily pushed herself. She fell, she cried, she screamed in frustration when her body betrayed her. But each time she stood again. The therapists encouraged her, but it was Alexander's presence that gave her strength. He showed up without fail, sometimes in a crisp suit after business meetings, sometimes in casual clothes with takeout bags in his hands. He was never intrusive, never overbearing. He was simply there. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Emily collapsed into her wheelchair, her body shaking with exhaustion. "I can't do this," she whispered, covering her face. I'm useless. Damien was right. Who would ever want someone like me? Alexander crouched down in front of her, gently lowering her hands from her face. Don't you dare believe his lies. You're not useless, Emily. You're unstoppable. Look at what you've survived. Look at the child you're carrying. Damien's words don't define you. Your courage does. His voice was so steady, so fierce, that Emily's heart trembled. For the first time, she allowed herself to meet his eyes fully. In them, she didn't see pity. She saw admiration. She saw belief. And it made her want to believe too. Weeks turned into months. Emily learned to maneuver with crutches, her body growing stronger each day. Her pregnancy progressed, and with every kick she felt inside her belly, her determination deepened. She would not let Damien's cruelty define her child's future. She would not be the broken woman he tried to leave behind. One afternoon, Alexander arrived with something that made her breath catch. A custom-designed prosthetic leg. Sleek, modern, crafted with care. It's yours, he said softly, when you're ready. Emily touched it with trembling fingers, tears welling in her eyes. Why are you doing all this for me? She asked. Alexander's gaze softened. Because you deserve to know what it feels like to be valued, to be truly seen. Her heart skipped. She wasn't ready to admit what she felt stirring inside her. But as she looked at him, she knew one truth with absolute certainty. For the first time in years, she was no longer alone. For weeks after the subway incident, Damien tried to act as though nothing had happened. He polished his image, smiled for reporters, and tightened his grip on his company. But beneath the glossy surface, cracks began to spread like spiderwebs across glass. And once they appeared, there was no stopping the collapse. The first blow came quietly. A subpoena landed on his desk one morning, thick with legal weight. Damien ripped it open, his jaw tightening as he read. Charges of attempted murder, assault, and financial fraud. The subway's surveillance cameras had captured everything. The shove, Emily's fall, his cold retreat into the crowd. Witnesses had come forward, and not just strangers. One was a respected city official who had seen the entire thing. Damien's name was no longer whispered with admiration in boardrooms. It was hissed in disgust. At first, he dismissed it. Money fixes everything, he told himself, pacing the marble floors of his penthouse. Judges can be bought. Lawyers can spin a story. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at his confidence. Because this time, the story wasn't just about numbers. It was about blood, about a pregnant woman, about a child who had almost died. The public outrage was deafening. Then came the second blow. Roxanne. She had once been his comfort, his escape from responsibility, the woman who stroked his ego and laughed at his cruel jokes. But as the lawsuits piled up, she grew distant. She stopped answering his calls, stopped showing up at his apartment. When she did appear, her tone was sharp, her eyes calculating. I didn't sign up for this, she snapped one night, tossing her designer purse onto his sofa. Do you know what people are saying about me? They call me the mistress of a murderer. Do you think that looks good on my resume? Damien's temper flared. After everything I gave you, the clothes, the jewelry, the trips, you ungrateful little. Don't, she cut him off, her voice icy. Don't forget, Damien, I know everything. I know about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the money you laundered to hide your gambling debts. If you drag me down, I'll drag you down with me. Her words struck him harder than any courtroom threat. Roxanne, the woman he thought he controlled, was slipping from his grasp. And worse, she held weapons of her own. The third blow came in whispers. Investors began pulling out. Deals collapsed overnight. Newspapers ran headlines like Millionaire Monster, Damien Tran's fall from grace. Protesters gathered outside his office, chanting for justice. Once loyal employees leaked stories of his cruelty, his corruption, his arrogance. His empire, built on intimidation and lies, was turning to ash in his hands. Alone in his penthouse, Damien poured himself a glass of scotch, staring out at the glittering skyline. His reflection in the window looked unfamiliar. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, the mask of a man cornered. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't control. Fear. Because somewhere out there, Emily was still alive. And the stranger who had pulled her from the tracks, Alexander Blackwell, was a name Damien could no longer ignore. The war between them had only just begun. The first time Emily wheeled herself to the hospital nursery, her heart pounded harder than it ever had. Behind the glass, newborns slept peacefully, wrapped in soft blankets, their tiny fists curled as if holding on to the promise of life itself. Emily pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the familiar kicks. Her child wasn't here yet, but soon she would hold them. And that thought gave her strength unlike anything she had ever known. For weeks, she had lived in shadows, grieving her leg, mourning the woman she thought she had lost. But slowly, she began to realize that survival had given her something Damien never could: freedom. She no longer had to please him. She no longer had to shrink herself to fit inside his cruel world. She had endured his worst, and yet here she was, alive, carrying a child, and beginning again. The hospital staff began to notice the change. She smiled more often, laughed quietly when nurses teased her, and embraced the grind of therapy with renewed determination. Each step she took on her prosthetic leg, though shaky and painful, felt like a victory. Each tear she shed on the therapy mat wasn't just grief, it was release. Alexander saw it too. He had watched her break, and now he watched her rebuild. Every day, his admiration deepened. It wasn't her tragedy that moved him, it was her resilience. He found himself drawn not just to her courage, but to the warmth she carried, even in her brokenness. She would ask about his day, tease him when he looked too serious, and thank him for the smallest gestures, as though they were gifts beyond measure. One evening, after a long therapy session, Emily sat in her wheelchair by the hospital garden. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of fresh flowers. Alexander joined her, 2 steaming cups of tea in his hands. He passed one to her, and for a moment they simply sat in silence. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked quietly, her gaze fixed on the stars. "Every day," he replied. "But the future isn't about what I build anymore. It's about who I build it with." His eyes softened as he looked at her. Emily's heart skipped, but she shook her head gently. "I can't think about that right now. My focus has to be on this baby." Alexander nodded. "And that's exactly why I'm here, to make sure you never have to do it alone." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. For so long she had begged Damien for partnership, for kindness, for love. Now, sitting beside Alexander, she realized she no longer had to beg. She was worthy of it all along. As the night deepened, she whispered to her unborn child, "We'll be okay. Mommy's stronger now, and we're not alone anymore." For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't just surviving, she was rising. And soon the world would see just how powerful she had become. While Emily rebuilt her life one painful step at a time, Alexander was orchestrating a different kind of recovery, one that involved exposing Damien for the monster he truly was. Behind his calm demeanor, he was moving pieces like a chess master, gathering every scrap of evidence to ensure Damien would never escape justice. His private investigators worked around the clock. They dug through Damien's financial records, tracing shell companies registered under false names, offshore accounts used to hide millions, and a trail of gambling debts that contradicted the disciplined businessman image he flaunted. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, it was all there, carefully hidden but impossible to erase. But the financial crimes were only part of the story. Alexander's team also tracked down employees who had once worked for Damien, people who had been fired, bullied, or silenced. One by one, they came forward. Their testimonies painted a picture of a tyrant who manipulated contracts, coerced young women, and destroyed anyone who dared to stand in his way. Some spoke of seeing Roxanne with him at private meetings that crossed the line of professionalism long before Emily ever suspected. The most damning piece came from the subway incident itself. Security footage clearly showed Damien shoving Emily toward the tracks. It wasn't an accident, as his lawyers had tried to claim. It was deliberate, his hand pressing hard against her shoulder, his face twisted with rage. When Alexander saw the tape for the first time, his fists clenched, his jaw tightening. "This ends now," he muttered. Meanwhile, Roxanne's loyalty began to crumble. Damien had promised her the world, but as his empire faltered, she realized she had tied herself to a sinking ship. One late night, Alexander's investigators intercepted her leaving Damien's penthouse, her face pale, her phone clutched tightly. Days later, she reached out anonymously to one of Alexander's contacts. Her voice on the recording was sharp but tinged with fear. "I'll talk, but I want immunity. Damien's planning worse than you think." Alexander listened carefully to every word. Roxanne revealed secret meetings, bribes, and even threats Damien had made against Emily during her pregnancy. The evidence wasn't just strong, it was explosive. In his office overlooking the city skyline, Alexander spread the documents across his desk. It was all there: bank statements, testimonies, surveillance footage, recordings, enough to destroy Damien's career, his fortune, and his freedom. But Alexander wasn't satisfied with quiet justice. He wanted the world to see Damien fall the same way Emily had been forced to bleed, publicly, brutally, and without mercy. He leaned back in his chair, his mind already picturing the courtroom, the flashing cameras, the look on Damien's face when his power slipped through his fingers. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about redemption, for Emily, for her child, and for every victim who had suffered under Damien's reign. Alexander closed the file with finality. The storm was ready, and when it broke, Damien Tran would have nowhere left to hide. The mirror in Emily's hospital room had been her enemy for months. Every time she caught her reflection, she saw loss. The woman with sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, and a missing leg. But on this day, as she wheeled herself closer, something different looked back at her. It wasn't weakness anymore, it was resolve. Her rehabilitation had given her more than strength. It had given her courage. She no longer whispered to her child about surviving Damien's cruelty. Now, she promised them a future where he could never hurt them again. And for the first time in years, she felt ready to fight. Alexander noticed the change immediately. He found her one morning practicing with her prosthetic leg, her body trembling but her chin lifted high. Sweat dripped down her temples, but her eyes burned with determination. "You don't look like someone who's surviving," he told her quietly. "You look like someone who's about to win." Emily smiled faintly, a smile she hadn't worn in years. "Then help me look the part." And so he did. Within days, Alexander arranged for a team of stylists, designers, and therapists. Not to transform her into someone new, but to help her reclaim the woman she had once been, the woman Damien had tried to erase. The makeover wasn't about clothes or makeup. It was about rediscovering herself. The stylist chose outfits that balanced elegance with power, sleek dresses tailored to her frame, bold colors that lit up her complexion. A custom shoe was designed to match her prosthetic, turning what once felt like shame into a symbol of resilience. The makeup artist didn't hide her scars. She enhanced her natural beauty, allowing Emily's strength to shine through her eyes. When she finally looked in the mirror again, she gasped. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was radiant. She was strong. She was unafraid. Alexander watched from the doorway, his heart tightening. He had seen her bleed, cry, and fall apart. Now he saw her rise. And in that moment, he knew. Emily wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. She was preparing for war. As part of her preparation, Alexander walked her through the evidence his team had gathered. They sat together late into the night, documents spread across the table. Emily listened intently, her jaw tightening with every revelation. Fraud, betrayal, lies, all of it confirmed what her heart had known. Damien hadn't just tried to kill her. He had tried to erase her existence. "No more," Emily said firmly, closing the folder with steady hands. "You will face me. And this time, I won't be silent." The plan was set. A press conference loomed, one that would shatter Damien's carefully crafted image. Emily would stand before the cameras, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She would tell her story, reveal the truth, and strip him of the power he had once wielded over her. That night, as she lay in bed, her baby kicked gently, as if urging her forward. She smiled, whispering, "We're almost there. Mommy's ready." And when the world saw her again, they would no longer see Damien's discarded wife. They would see Emily Tran, reborn, unstoppable, and ready for justice. The press conference was held in one of Manhattan's grandest hotels, its ballroom transformed into a battlefield of flashing cameras and eager reporters. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes pointed skyward, while a restless crowd gathered at the doors, buzzing with rumors. Everyone wanted to know the truth about Damien Tran, the millionaire whose empire was crumbling under the weight of scandal. Emily sat backstage, her hands folded tightly over her stomach. Her prosthetic leg ached from the morning's walk, but she refused to show weakness. Dressed in a tailored ivory dress with bold sapphire earrings, she looked nothing like the broken woman Damien had tried to bury. She looked like a woman reborn. Alexander knelt beside her chair, adjusting the microphone pinned to her dress. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Emily drew in a shaky breath, then nodded. "For my child. For every night he made me feel worthless. Yes, I'm ready." When they stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in a storm of camera flashes. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Emily's heart pounded, but Alexander's steady presence at her side anchored her. He placed a hand on the podium first, his voice carrying authority that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we are here today not for speculation, but for truth. Truth about a man who has built an empire on lies and cruelty. Truth about a woman who has survived his worst and found her voice." He turned toward Emily, his gaze filled with pride. "Today, Emily Tran will speak." The room went still. Emily gripped the podium, her hands trembling for only a moment before she steadied herself. Her voice, though soft at first, grew stronger with every word. "My name is Emily Tran. I am 6 months pregnant, and a few weeks ago, my husband pushed me onto subway tracks with the intention of killing me and our child." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Cameras zoomed in, capturing her steady eyes, her unflinching tone. "I lost my leg that night," she continued, lifting the hem of her dress slightly to reveal the sleek prosthetic. "But I did not lose my life. I did not lose my child. And I will not lose my voice." Behind the rows of reporters, murmurs grew louder, outrage spilling into every corner of the room. Emily opened the folder Alexander had placed on the podium and held up documents. "These are records of fraud, embezzlement, and illegal accounts tied to Damien Tran. Witnesses have come forward, employees silenced for years. Even his mistress has confirmed his corruption." The room erupted, reporters shouting, cameras flashing wildly. And then, as if scripted by fate, the ballroom doors opened. Damien strode in, his face pale but defiant. The crowd turned, microphones thrust toward him. Emily's heart raced, but she stood taller. For the first time, she faced him not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his equal opponent. "You tried to destroy me," she said clearly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "But today, the world sees the truth." Damien froze under the weight of 1,000 eyes. And for the first time, his silence condemned him more than his words ever could. The empire he had built on lies was beginning to collapse, and Emily had struck the first blow. The press conference detonated like a bomb across the city. By evening, every news station replayed Emily's trembling yet powerful words on loop. Headlines blazed across screens: "Millionaire husband, tried to kill pregnant wife, Damien Tran exposed, fraud, betrayal, attempted murder." Damien's carefully curated image of charm and sophistication was obliterated in a single afternoon. Outside his office, protesters gathered with signs that read, "Justice for Emily and no more millionaire monsters." Investors withdrew millions overnight, stock in his company plummeting like a stone tossed into the sea. Damien's name, once synonymous with success, was now spat with venom in every household across the city. But the final blow came not from Emily, nor from Alexander's investigators, but from Roxanne. For weeks, she had been distancing herself, worried her reputation would sink alongside his. Now, with reporters swarming like vultures, she saw her opportunity to survive and to punish him. Late one night, Roxanne appeared on a primetime interview, her face perfectly framed by studio lights, her tone sharp but laced with faux regret. "Yes," she admitted, "I was in a relationship with Damien Tran. But I was manipulated too. He promised me everything: marriage, fortune, a future. What he never told me was that he was laundering money, bribing officials, and abusing his wife. When I found out, I was horrified." Her crocodile tears glistened, but what mattered most was what she revealed next. "I still have proof," Roxanne declared, sliding a flash drive across the table to the host. Emails, texts, recordings. Damien bragged about hiding money offshore, about silencing employees who questioned him, even about making sure Emily wouldn't be a problem anymore. The studio gasped, the internet exploded, and Damien's empire cracked beyond repair. Back in his penthouse, Damien hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering across marble floors. "Ungrateful witch," he roared. His reflection in the shattered mirror showed a man unraveling, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, the swagger gone. The phone rang non-stop with calls from lawyers, board members, even his own family, all demanding explanations he no longer had. He tried to fight back, issuing a public statement claiming Emily was unstable, and Roxanne a bitter ex. But the damage was irreversible. The footage, the testimonies, the paper trail, they all screamed louder than his denials. Every word he uttered only made him look more desperate, more guilty. Meanwhile, Emily's courage inspired a tidal wave of support. Victims of abuse wrote letters to her hospital, thanking her for speaking out. Women who had been silenced for years began sharing their own stories online, using hashtags with her name. Emily had become more than a survivor, she was a symbol. And Alexander made sure Damien knew it. Sitting in his office, Alexander signed the final papers with his legal team. By tomorrow morning, he said coldly, Damien Tran won't just lose his reputation, he'll lose his freedom. In his penthouse, Damien poured himself another drink, his hands shaking. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. The empire he had built on lies, greed, and cruelty had collapsed, and the woman he tried to erase was now the reason the world would never forget him. The courthouse was packed to the brim. News cameras lined the steps outside, their lenses hungry for every frame of Damien Tran's downfall. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the kind that hummed through the marble walls like static electricity. Rows of spectators filled the benches, journalists, activists, ordinary citizens, all waiting to see justice delivered. Emily sat at the witness stand, her prosthetic leg resting firmly on the floor, her hands folded over her swollen belly. She wore a navy blue dress, simple but commanding, her hair pulled back to reveal eyes that no longer trembled with fear. This was not the Emily Damien had tried to silence. This was the Emily who had survived fire and risen stronger. Damien sat at the defense table, his once perfect suit rumpled, his face pale but defiant. His lawyers whispered frantically, shuffling papers, but he barely heard them. His eyes locked on Emily, burning with the same venom he had carried on the subway platform. Yet for the first time, she did not look away. The judge called for silence. Mrs. Tran, you may proceed. Emily took a breath, steadying her voice. My name is Emily Tran. I am 30 years old, 6 months pregnant, and the man sitting there, she pointed at Damien, is my husband, the man who tried to kill me. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Damien's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. Sustained, the judge said sharply. The witness will continue. Emily recounted everything. The years of emotional abuse, the isolation, the humiliation at the gala. Her voice cracked when she described the shove at the subway, the scream that still haunted her dreams, the blood that stained the tracks. Some spectators wiped tears from their eyes. Others clenched fists, their anger palpable. And yet, Emily continued, her hand brushing over her belly, even as I lay on those tracks, bleeding, broken, I felt my baby kick. That life reminded me I had something to fight for. Damien wanted me erased, but I'm here. I survived, and I will make sure he never hurts anyone again. The prosecution played the surveillance footage. The grainy video flickered on the screen, showing Damien's hand pushing Emily forward, her body tumbling onto the tracks. Gasps filled the room. Damien shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Then came Roxanne's testimony, her voice echoing from a recorded deposition. She detailed Damien's corruption, the offshore accounts, the threats he made. Her words cut deep, leaving no room for doubt. Finally, the prosecutor turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just fraud or abuse of power. This is attempted murder. Damien Tran believed his wealth made him untouchable. Today, you have the power to prove him wrong. The jury's faces were grave, their eyes heavy with the weight of truth. Emily looked at Damien one last time. She felt no fear, no hatred, only closure. He had tried to destroy her, but here she stood, stronger than ever. And when the gavel struck, the world would know his empire was finished. The courtroom was silent, so silent that Emily could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. 12 jurors filed back into their seats, their faces solemn, unreadable. Emily held her breath, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the steady rhythm of her unborn child. She wasn't just waiting for justice for herself, she was waiting for justice for the life Damien had tried to erase. The judge cleared her throat. Has the jury reached a verdict? A woman in the front row stood, holding a folded piece of paper. We have, Your Honor. The clerk accepted the note and handed it to the judge, who scanned it before speaking. Her voice was firm, steady, carrying the weight of finality. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. On the charges of fraud and embezzlement, guilty. On the charge of assault, guilty. The words fell like thunder, shaking the very air. Gasps and murmurs erupted in the courtroom. Damien's face drained of color, his jaw tightening, his hands clenching the table. For the first time, the arrogance slipped away. He looked not like a millionaire, not like a man of power, but like a caged animal, finally cornered. Emily exhaled, her eyes filling with tears. Not tears of pain this time, but of release. For years she had carried his cruelty like chains around her soul. Now, those chains shattered. She turned her gaze toward him, steady and unflinching. The judge's gavel struck once. Damien Tran is hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison without possibility of parole for the first 15 years. His assets, including properties and accounts linked to fraud, are to be seized immediately. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail. Cameras flashing, pens scratching furiously across notepads. Outside, the crowd roared as the news spread. Justice had been served. Damien leapt to his feet, shouting, "This isn't over. You'll regret this, Emily." Security officers restrained him, forcing his arms behind his back. He struggled, but it was useless. The image of him being dragged from the courtroom in handcuffs would soon be splashed across every news outlet in the nation. Emily didn't flinch at his words. She sat taller, her chin lifted high. For once, his rage didn't pierce her. It bounced off, meaningless. She had won. Alexander, sitting just behind her, reached forward and gently touched her shoulder. She turned, meeting his steady gaze, and in his eyes she saw not just victory, but pride. As Damien disappeared through the side doors, Emily whispered softly to her unborn child, "We're free now. He can't hurt us anymore." The courtroom emptied slowly, but Emily lingered, savoring the moment. The woman who had been pushed onto train tracks, who had lost a leg, who had been humiliated and discarded, she had become the woman who stood up in court and toppled a tyrant. And as the gavel's echo faded, Emily knew this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a new life, one built on truth, courage, and freedom. The hospital room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp near the bed. Emily cradled her newborn daughter in her arms, her eyes swollen from tears but glowing with a peace she hadn't felt in years. The baby's tiny fingers curled around her own, warm and strong, as if promising her that the future would be brighter. She whispered softly, "You're my miracle. You saved me as much as I saved you." The delivery had been long and exhausting, but when Emily first heard her baby's cry, all the pain melted away. She had feared for so long that Damien's cruelty would define her child's life. But now, as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she knew the opposite was true. This child would be raised in love, not fear. In strength, not submission. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander stepped in, carrying a bouquet of lilies, his smile tender but his eyes filled with emotion. He paused at the sight of her holding the baby, almost as if the moment itself was too sacred to disturb. "Come here," Emily said softly, gesturing him closer. He approached, setting the flowers on the table before leaning down to look at the baby. "She's perfect," he whispered, awe lacing his voice. Emily's lips curved into a small smile. "Meet Lily Grace." Alexander's throat tightened. A beautiful name, just like her mother. For a moment silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken feelings. Emily looked at him, her eyes shimmering. "You've done so much for me, Alexander. You gave me strength when I had none. You stood by me when I thought no one ever would. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to," he said firmly. Then, after a pause, his voice softened. "Emily, I don't just admire you. I love you. I've loved you from the moment I saw you fight for your life on those tracks. And if you'll let me, I'll love Lily too. I'll be here, not as a savior, but as a partner." Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time. She reached for his hand, guiding it to rest gently on Lily's tiny chest. "Then stay," she whispered, "because for the first time, I believe we can build something real, something safe." Alexander leaned down, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. In that moment, the hospital room no longer felt like a place of endings. It felt like a place of beginnings. Months later, Emily stood on a stage at a charity gala hosted by Alexander's foundation. She wore a flowing gown, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath, but she no longer cared who saw. Lily was safe in the arms of a nurse backstage, and Emily's voice carried across the hall. "I was once told I was worthless, that my life had no value. But I stand here today as proof that no one has the right to define your worth but you. To every woman suffering in silence, your voice matters, your life matters, and you are stronger than you think. The audience rose in thunderous applause, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. Emily smiled, her daughter's future glowing before her, and knew with certainty she had not only survived, she had triumphed. So here we are, my dear friends. The story has reached its end, but if you're still here with me right now, I know something in Emily's journey touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, or of someone you love who has fought through darkness. Her story isn't just about betrayal or pain, it's about the quiet strength that lives in all of us, waiting to rise when life knocks us down. The Stoics used to say, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Emily lost so much, her marriage, her leg, the life she thought she had. But in that loss, she discovered freedom, resilience, and the courage to claim a future no one could take from her. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's exactly what Emily did. She couldn't control Damien's cruelty, but she could control how she rose from it. And isn't that the same for us? We can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose how to respond, how to grow, how to heal. Emily's story is a reminder that you are never defined by your scars. You are defined by your courage to keep going. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt broken, remember, you are not alone and you are not powerless. Healing is possible, transformation is possible, and like Emily, you can turn your pain into strength. If this story spoke to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that heal and inspire. Because together, we're building more than an audience. We're building a family of survivors, dreamers, and believers. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one that helps someone else find their strength.
Billionaire CEO abandoned her while pregnant. 3 years later, she married his cousin and raised his twins as their own. "If anyone objects to this union," the officiant said, "speak now or forever hold your peace." The church held its breath. Helena's eyes found Darian's, a silent plea and warning combined. He said nothing. What could he say? "Those are my children? I loved her first? I choose her now, 3 years too late?" The love he abandoned was standing before him in a white dress, marrying his own cousin. And she was no longer just the woman he left behind. She was stronger, fiercer, a mother, a bride. And he was just the ghost of the man who lost everything. Before we continue, welcome to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where stories come alive and hearts connect. A quiet thank you to my first 3 subscribers legends who joined when this was just a whisper in the wind. If you're watching this and love stories that stir the hearts, twist the mind and linger in memory, kindly subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach the ears they were meant for. Now let's begin. Sometimes the family you choose leads you to the family you never expected. And sometimes a simple labeling error can change the course of 3 lives forever. For, if you count the heart that stops beating and 2 more that keep fighting to survive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start where it really began, with a woman brave enough to choose motherhood alone, and a best friend whose desire to help would unleash a storm neither of them saw coming. The fertility clinic on Madison Avenue was pristine, cold, and clinical. She could only afford it after 3 years of saving every penny from her freelance writing. "Miss Brown?" The receptionist called. "Dr. Martinez will see you now." Helena's best friend Tess emerged from the back, her white coat a stark contrast to the worry in her eyes. They'd agreed to meet here professionally to keep things separate. But Tess knew why Helena was here. "You're sure about this?" Tess asked once they were in the consultation room. "I've never been more sure of anything." Helena pulled out her folder, donor profiles she'd studied like sacred texts. Number 3847. Teacher, musician, brown eyes. "He's perfect." "Lena." Tess bit her lip. "The waiting list for that donor is 2 years. 2 years." Helena's heart sank. "But I'm ready now. I've done the treatments, saved the money." "I know." Tess glanced at the door, then back at her friend. "There might be another way." Tess whispered, checking her watch. "Tonight. The lab will be empty, and I have access to the donor storage." "Tess, you could lose your license. You could lose your chance." Tess gripped Helena's hands. "I've watched you put your life on hold for men who didn't deserve you. Watched you save every penny while your biological clock ticked louder. I'm not letting bureaucracy stop you from becoming the mother you were meant to be. What if we get caught? We won't. I'll be careful. One vial, that's all. You're 3847. Tessa's eyes shone with determination. You've been my sister since college, Lena. Let me do this for you. That night, Helena waited in the procedure room, her heart hammering. The clinic was eerily quiet after hours, just the hum of refrigeration units keeping precious genetic material frozen in time. Tess appeared with a small metal container, frost billowing from its edges. Got it? Now let's make you a mama. The procedure was quick, clinical, but Helena felt the moment like a prayer. This was her choice. Her baby. Her future. All done, Tess said, disposing of the empty vial. In 2 weeks we'll know. They hugged, both crying a little, neither noticing the small label that had fallen from the container. X47291. Not 3847. 2 weeks later, Helena stared at 5 positive pregnancy tests lined up on her bathroom counter. Her hands shook as she dialed Tess. It worked. Oh my God, Tess, it worked. I'm coming over. We need to celebrate. They spent the evening planning, names, nursery colors, how Helena would balance freelance work with motherhood. Neither mentioned the father because there wasn't one. Just donor 3847, who'd remain a mystery forever. It was few weeks later when everything shattered. Helena sat in her OB's office for routine genetic screening, still glowing from seeing her baby's heartbeat. Dr. Patricia Chin frowned at her computer screen. Miss Brown, I need to verify some information. Your donor number. 3847. Why? Because these genetic markers. Dr. Chen's face went white. This isn't possible. I need to make a call. Is something wrong with my baby? No, the baby is perfect. But the father. She trailed off, already dialing. Mr. Cole? This is Dr. Chen from Manhattan Fertility. We have a situation. Helena's blood froze. Cole. As in? Darian Cole's genetic material has been identified in an unauthorized pregnancy. Dr. Chen continued, her eyes cold as they fixed on Helena. Yes, sir. She's here now. There must be a mistake, Helena whispered. The only mistake, Dr. Chen said, hanging up, was thinking you could steal from Darian Cole and get away with it. He'll be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you prepare your explanation. Helena's hand went to her stomach, where her chosen baby grew. Only it wasn't the child of a kind teacher who loved music. It was the heir of a billionaire who destroyed anyone who crossed him. Darian Cole entered the clinic like a force of nature, 6'4" of controlled fury in a $10,000 suit. His eyes, gray as winter storms, fixed on Helena with laser focus. You're the thief. I'm not a thief. Helena stood, though her legs trembled. There was a mix-up. I thought. You thought you'd steal my genetic material? My legacy? Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't know it was yours. I chose donor 3847. Convenient story. He circled her like a predator. My sperm was in a restricted vault. Biometric locks. Armed security. Yet somehow it ended up in you. Explain that. I can't. My friend helped me, she must have grabbed the wrong. Your friend. Dr. Teresa Martinez. He pulled out a file, prepared as always. Best friend since college. Fertility specialist with access to our facility. This was planned. No. Tess would never. Everyone has a price, Miss Brown. What was yours? 10 million? 20? Or were you hoping to trap me with a baby? Trap you? Fury overrode her fear. I don't even know you. I didn't want some billionaire's baby, I wanted... Her voice cracked. I wanted a child to love. Someone who wouldn't leave me. Something flickered in his eyes, gone before she could identify it. Well, congratulations. You're carrying a Cole heir. My heir. His voice dropped, dangerous. The child my ex-wife couldn't give me in 5 years of marriage. The legacy I paid $50 million to preserve. And you think I'll let some nobody freelancer steal that from me? I'm not stealing anything. This is my baby. This is my child. The words came out as a roar. My DNA. My property. And you have 2 choices. Give me full custody when it's born, or I destroy you and everyone you love. You can't. I can. I will. He pulled out his phone, showing security footage. Your friend entering the restricted area. You waiting in the procedure room. Conspiracy to commit corporate theft. That's 20 years, Miss Brown. For both of you. Helena sank into the chair, hand protectively over her stomach. Please. Tess was just trying to help me.
Punish me.
What terms? His smile was cold as Arctic wind. You live in my home. Follow my rules. Give birth under my supervision. Then you walk away. The child stays with me. You disappear. I can't give up my baby. You can and you will. Unless you prefer prison? He leaned down, his cologne, something that probably cost more than her rent, filling her lungs. Decide now. Your friend is already in custody. What? No. Helena pulled out her phone, finding texts from Tess. They arrested me, Lena. I'm so sorry, it was an accident, I swear, help me. Let her go, Helena begged. Please. This is my fault. Oh, I'll do whatever you want. Just let Tess go. Whatever I want? His eyes glinted. Careful, Miss Brown. I might hold you to that. The baby. You can have custody. Just please. Full custody. You carry to term in my home. Under my watch. Then you leave. Forever. Each word was a knife to her heart. But Tessa's next text decided everything. They're threatening 20 years, I'm so scared. Yes, Helena whispered. I agree. Smart girl. Darian straightened, already typing. Pack your things. You move in tonight. Tonight. Did you think I'd leave my heir's development to chance? You're carrying precious cargo, Miss Brown. It needs to be properly supervised. As he strode out, commanding the room to release Tess, Helena touched her stomach. I'm so sorry, little one. Mommy made a mess of everything. But she had no idea how big that mess would become. Or that the man who just claimed her baby would soon claim her heart, only to shatter it when his past came calling. And none of them knew that 3 tiny hearts were beating inside her, not one. The universe, it seemed, loved its little ironies. The Bentley that picked Helena up might as well have been a hearse. She sat in the back, one suitcase beside her, watching her old life disappear through tinted windows. The driver said nothing during the hour-long drive to the coal estate in the Hamptons. This can't be one house, Helena breathed as they passed through the 3rd security gate. But it was. 40,000 square feet of glass and stone rising from manicured grounds like a modern castle. The kind of place that screamed money so loudly it didn't need to whisper class. Welcome to your prison, she muttered. Miss Brown. A severe woman in black stood at the entrance. I'm Mrs. Chin, head of household. Mr. Cole has outlined your situation. The pause before situation said everything. Helena was the trash that had wandered into their pristine world. These are the rules, Mrs. Chin continued, leading her through marble halls lined with art that belonged in museums. You don't enter the West Wing, that's Mr. Cole's private quarters. Meals are at 7 noon, and 6 in the small dining room. No visitors without approval. No leaving the grounds without security. No alcohol, no processed foods, no activities that could endanger the child. The child. Not my child. Precisely. Mrs. Chin stopped at a door. You're sweet. The room was bigger than Helena's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean, and everything was in shades of cream and gold. Beautiful. Cold. Empty. Mr. Cole will see you for dinner. 7 sharp. Don't be late. Alone, Helena sank onto the bed that probably cost more than her yearly income. Her phone buzzed. Tess. I'm free. Lena, I'm so sorry, it was the wrong vial I grabbed from the wrong section, please forgive me. Helena typed back. Not your fault. I'll be okay. But as she looked around her gilded cage, she wondered if that was true. Dinner was torture disguised as fine dining. Helena sat at one end of a table that could seat 20, Darian at the other. Between them stretched what felt like miles of mahogany and misunderstanding. Eat, he commanded when she just stared at her plate. The chef prepared this specifically for prenatal nutrition. I'm not hungry. I don't care. Eat. Is this how it's going to be? You barking orders for 9 months. 8 months, he corrected. And yes, if necessary. That child needs proper nutrition. This child, Helena's voice rose, needs a mother who isn't miserable. Then don't be miserable. You're living in luxury. Staff at your disposal. Everything you could want. Except freedom. Or choice. Or the baby I'm carrying. Darian's jaw tightened. He looked devastating in the candlelight, all sharp angles and controlled power. The kind of man who probably had women throwing themselves at him daily. Which made her situation even more pathetic. Tell me about yourself, he said suddenly. Why? Because you're carrying my heir. I should know something about the vessel. Vessel? Helena laughed bitterly. How romantic. This isn't about romance, Miss Brown. This is a business arrangement. Right. I'm just the incubator. She pushed her plate away. Fine. I'm 29. Freelance writer. No family. Parents died when I was 13, raised by an elderly aunt who passed 5 years ago. Happy? Is my tragic backstory sufficient for your files? Something shifted in his expression. How did they die? Car accident. Drunk driver. She met his gaze defiantly. Is that genetic enough information for you? Can I promise your heir won't inherit a tendency to be orphaned? I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Helena stood. May I be excused? The vessel is tired. She left before he could answer, missing the way his hands clenched around his wine glass. Week 3 brought a visitor Helena didn't expect. She was in the garden, sketching ideas for her next article when a shadow fell across her notebook. So you're the surrogate. The woman was stunning in that carefully maintained way, blonde hair that had never seen a bad day, skin that had been lifted and tucked and injected to porcelain perfection. She wore white designer tennis clothes that had clearly never seen a court. I'm sorry? The woman carrying my husband's baby. She sat uninvited. I'm Renee, the ex-wife. Helena's blood chilled. I don't think I should be talking to you. What? Because Darian forbids it? Renee laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking champagne flutes. He forbids many things. Like me having children. Did you know that? That's not. 5 years of IVF. Every treatment available. My body kept rejecting his sperm. Her perfect face twisted. Do you know what it's like? Watching your husband grow colder with each failure? Knowing you're losing him because you can't give him the one thing he wants. I'm sorry, but... And now you waltz in, steal his sperm, and succeed where I failed. Renee leaned closer. Tell me, was it really an accident? Yes. I never meant. Of course not. Renee stood, smoothing her tennis skirt. A word of advice? Darian Cole doesn't forgive. And he doesn't forget. When you disappoint him, and you will, he'll destroy you just like he destroyed me. She left Helena shaking in the garden. That night, Helena couldn't stop Renee's words from echoing. When she came down for dinner, Darian was already seated, but something was different. The table had been shortened. Her place was set beside him instead of across the room. Sit, he said, but his voice lacked its usual command. Why the change? Mrs. Chin informed me you've been eating poorly. She thinks the formal distance is affecting your appetite. Since when do you care about my feelings? I don't. But he pulled out her chair. I care about the baby's development. This close, Helena could see the exhaustion he hid so well. The way his hand trembled slightly from too much coffee. The tension in his shoulders that spoke of 18-hour days. Your ex-wife visited today, she said quietly. His fork stilled. What did she want? To warn me. Said you destroy people who disappoint you. She's not wrong. He took a sip of wine. But she left out the part where she disappointed me first. By not having children? By fucking my brother while I was on a business trip. His voice was conversational, but Helena heard the pain underneath. In our bed. The bed where we tried so desperately to conceive. Oh. Helena's hand moved instinctively to touch his, then stopped. I'm sorry. What? You didn't betray me. No, but no one deserves that. He studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected, Helena Brown. What did you expect? Someone harder. Calculating. The kind of woman who steals genetic material must be. He trailed off. A monster. Ambitious. I am ambitious, Helena said softly. Just not for money or power. I wanted a family. Someone to love who wouldn't leave. People always leave. Do they? Or do we push them away? His eyes darkened. Careful, Miss Brown. You're here to carry a child, not psychoanalyze me. But his voice lacked venom, and when Helena accidentally knocked over her water, he caught the glass before it could spill on her. Their hands touched for just a moment, electricity and possibility. Thank you, she whispered. You're carrying my air, he said roughly. I protect what's mine. But the way he looked at her suggested protection wasn't all he was thinking about. That night, Helena lay in her luxurious bed, hand on her growing bump, and admitted the truth she'd been fighting. She was falling for Darian Cole. The man who owned her baby. The man who'd made it clear she was temporary. The man whose walls were so high she'd need wings to scale them. What have you gotten us into, little one? She whispered to her belly. The baby kicked in response, the first movement she'd felt. And despite everything, Helena smiled. She had no idea that in his room, Darian stood at his window, looking toward her wing of the house, fighting the same losing battle with his heart. Or that 3 tiny heartbeats pulsed inside her, not one. Or that Renee's visit hadn't been random, but the first move in a game that would destroy them all. If you are enjoying this story, kindly click on the like button and subscribe. The unexpected heat wave and a broken air conditioning system made Helena sleepless. She found Darian in the kitchen at 2 a.m., both of them seeking relief from the stifling heat. Couldn't sleep? He stood shirtless by the open freezer, and Helena's mouth went dry at the sight. Months of seeing him only in suits hadn't prepared her for the reality of Darian Cole's body, sculpted muscle and a scar across his ribs that begged for the story behind it. The baby's restless. She pulled her thin robe tighter, aware she wore only a silk nightgown underneath. The heat doesn't help. Here. He handed her a glass of ice water, their fingers brushing. The repair crew comes tomorrow. Why are you awake? Tokyo markets. But he closed his laptop, giving her his attention. You're bigger. Thanks. Every pregnant woman loves to hear that. But she smiled, touching her bump. 16 weeks. The doctor says everything's perfect. Good. His eyes tracked the movement of her hand. Can you feel it? Sometimes. Like butterfly wings. She hesitated, then made a decision. Do you want to feel? The air between them crackled. Darian Cole, the man who commanded boardrooms and destroyed companies, looked uncertain. I shouldn't. Why? Because. His voice roughened. If I touch you, I might not stop at your stomach. Heat that had nothing to do with broken air conditioning flooded Helena's body. Darian? Don't. He stepped back. Don't look at me like that. You're here for one reason. To carry your air. I know. You remind me daily. Frustration made her bold. But right now, at 2 a.m. with no one watching, can't we just be two people? Can't you just be the father wanting to feel his baby move? Is that what I am? The father? His laugh was bitter. Fathers read bedtime stories and teach bike riding. I'm just the donor who's paying for premium delivery. You're more than that. Am I? He moved closer, predatory grace in every step. What am I to you, Helena? I. Words failed as he backed her against the counter. Because I know what you are to me. His hands braced on either side of her, caging her in. Your torture. Walking around my house in summer dresses, smelling like vanilla and hope. Carrying my child while looking at me with those eyes that see too much. What do they see? A man who's losing his mind. His breath fanned her face. A man who lies awake thinking about the woman he's sworn not to touch. A man who's starting to wish this wasn't just a business arrangement. Then change it. The words came out as a whisper. Touch me. Helena. Her name was a prayer and a curse. If I kiss you now, everything changes. Everything already has changed. She reached up, fingers tracing his jaw. We've been dancing around this for weeks. The lingering looks. The accidental touches. The way you moved my place at dinner so you could be closer. That was for the baby? Liar. She smiled. The mighty Darian Cole, reduced to high school tactics to be near the girl he likes. This isn't high school. His control was fraying. This is me wanting to do things to you that would shock that innocent face. This is me fighting not to carry you to my bed and show you exactly how much you've been driving me insane. I'm not that innocent. Her hand slid up his bare chest, feeling his sharp intake of breath. And I'm not fragile. The baby. Fuck the baby, he growled, then immediately softened. No, I didn't mean. I know what you meant. Helena pulled his head down. For once in your controlled life, just feel. Just let go. Their lips met, and 8 weeks of tension exploded like a dam breaking. Darian kissed like he did everything else, with focused intensity and devastating skill. His tongue claimed her mouth while his hands tangled in her hair, and Helena melted against him, hormones and desire creating a potent cocktail of need. Bedroom, he commanded against her lips. Yours or mine? Mine. He lifted her easily, careful of her bump. Your bed smells like you. I'd never be able to sleep there again without going insane. He carried her through dark hallways to the forbidden West Wing. His bedroom was exactly what she'd expected. Masculine, minimal, dominated by a massive bed that looked like sin wrapped in Egyptian cotton. Last chance, he said, setting her down beside it. Tell me to stop. Instead, Helena let her robe drop. The silk nightgown beneath was practically transparent, and Darian's eyes went dark as midnight. You're going to be the death of me, he muttered, then pulled her back for another searing kiss. His hands were everywhere, gentle over her bump, worshipful on her sensitive breasts, demanding on her hips. Helena had never felt desire like this, never understood how need could be a physical ache. "I've wanted this since you walked into that clinic," Darian confessed, trailing kisses down her throat. "Furious at you but unable to look away. So beautiful, so defiant, so she gasped as he found a particularly sensitive spot. "Or am I exactly right?" He laid her on the bed, taking a moment to just look. "You're carrying my child. In my house. In my bed. How much more right could you be, Magisla?" What followed was passion Helena had only read about. Darian worshipped every inch of her changing body, treating her like precious glass and a goddess in turns. When he finally thrust in, moving carefully, reverently, Helena understood why people called it making love. "Mine?" he growled against her throat as they moved together. "Say it." "Yours?" she gasped, meaning it more than any contract could make her. "Always yours." The next days after that night were the happiest of Helena's life. Darian couldn't keep his hands off her, stealing kisses in hallways, pulling her into his office during conference calls to mouth, "I miss you," making love to her with a desperation that suggested he was storing up memories. "We should tell people," Helena suggested one morning, wrapped in his sheets while he traced patterns on her bump. "Make it official." "Tell them what?" He kissed her shoulder. "That I'm sleeping with my surrogate?" The word stung. "Is that all I am?" "No." He turned her to face him. "You're everything. Which is exactly why we can't tell anyone." "I don't understand." "My world isn't kind to weakness, Helena. And you?" He cupped her face. "You're my greatest weakness. If my enemies knew how I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" The question hung between them. Darian opened his mouth, closed it, then kissed her instead of answering. But Helena heard what he couldn't say in the desperate press of his lips. "Everything ends when the baby's born," she whispered. "Then we'll start a new chapter." He pulled her closer. "One that keeps you here. Both of you." "You mean it?" "I've never meant anything more." His hand splayed over her bump. "I want this. All of it. You, our child, a real family. Not some business arrangement." "Darian Cole wants a family?" She teased to hide her tears. "What will the financial world say? That I've gone soft." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "And they'd be right. You've ruined me for cold beds and empty houses, Helena Brown." That afternoon, while Darian was in a board meeting, Helena felt the first cramp. Sharp, wrong, terrifying. "No," she whispered, gripping the garden bench. "Please no." The second cramp brought her to her knees. By the time she screamed for help, blood was already staining her summer dress. "The baby," she sobbed as staff rushed around her. "Save my baby." But as the ambulance wailed toward the hospital, Helena felt her happiness slipping away with each pain. The universe, it seemed, didn't believe in fairy tales. Not for women like her. Not with men like him. And somewhere in a Manhattan penthouse, Renee Cole smiled at her phone as her planted nurse reported in. "Yes, it worked." Pause. "Of course the baby won't survive. I made sure of that when I had you switch her prenatal vitamins." Tragic, really. But necessary. The game was entering its final phase. And Renee had been playing it far longer than anyone knew. "I'm so sorry, Miss Brown. There's no heartbeat." Dr. Patterson's words echoed in the hospital room as Helena stared at the ultrasound screen, willing it to flicker back to life. But the monitor remained still, silent, a black void where her baby's heartbeat should have been. "No." Her hand pressed against her stomach. "Check again. Please." "Helena." Darian gripped her hand, his own face ashen. "Baby." "Don't call me that." She jerked away. "Check again. My baby was fine last week. Strong heartbeat, moving." "Sometimes these things happen," Dr. Patterson said gently. "Miscarriage can occur without warning. There's nothing you could have done. But I did everything right. The vitamins, the rest, the diet." "I know. I'm so sorry." The doctor squeezed her shoulder. When they were alone, Helena curled into herself, keening with grief. Darian tried to hold her, but she pushed him away. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I wanted a baby so badly, I stole your sperm and now." "No." Darian pulled her against him despite her resistance. "This isn't punishment. Sometimes terrible things just happen. Our baby is gone." "I know." His voice broke. "I know, love. I'm so sorry." They held each other in that sterile room, united in grief for a child they'd never hold. Darian held her, his tears falling silently. 2 days later, Helena lay in Darian's bed, empty and broken. He'd insisted on bringing her home, caring for her, but she felt like a ghost haunting his perfect life. You need to eat, he said softly, bringing soup. I'm not hungry. Helena. I lost our baby Darian. I'm allowed to not be hungry. He set the tray aside, pulling her close. We lost her. Together. And we'll grieve together. For how long? Until you realize I'm just the broken surrogate who couldn't even carry your heir properly? Stop. His voice was fierce. You're not a surrogate. You're the woman I love. You love me? The words came out small, desperate. Of course I love you. How can you doubt? The doorbell interrupted. Darian frowned. He'd told security no visitors. I'll get rid of whoever it is. He kissed her forehead. Rest. But minutes later, she heard raised voices. A woman's laugh, sharp and familiar. Can't just show up here, Renee. I'm pregnant with your child. I think that gives me certain privileges. Helena's blood froze. She crept to the top of the stairs, peering down at the foyer where Darian faced his ex-wife. That's impossible, he was saying. Is it? Renee touched her stomach. The Richmond Gala. 3 months ago. You were drunk, I was lonely. Ring any bells? I don't remember. Of course you don't. You could barely stand. She pulled out an ultrasound. But here's proof. 12 weeks. Healthy. Perfect. Everything we wanted for 5 years finally happening. Helena watched Darian stare at the image. Saw his face change as he did the math. Renee, even if this is true. You're doubting me? After 5 years of marriage? We're divorced. But not really, are we? We're still connected. And now, she touched her stomach again. Now we always will be. I'm with Helena. The surrogate? Oh, darling. Renee's laugh was cruel. I heard about the miscarriage. Tragic. But perhaps it's fate. Clearing the way for our real family. Don't talk about her loss. Our loss, you mean? This affects me too, Darian. My child's inheritance, complicated by your surrogate's baby. She stepped closer. But now that impediment is gone. We can focus on our child. Our future. Helena couldn't listen anymore. She stumbled back to the bedroom, Renee's words echoing. Their child. Their future. When Darian returned, his face was haunted. Is it true? Helena asked. Did you sleep with her? I don't know. That night is a blank. But the timing? The timing works. Her voice was dead. You could have gotten her pregnant. Helena? Are you the father? He sat heavily on the bed. I might be. Probably am. I was so drunk and she was there and you slept with your ex-wife while I was here in your house carrying your child. We weren't together then. You were just the surrogate. I know. Helena stood, suddenly clear on what she needed to do. And now she's having your baby while mine is dead. Our baby. Our loss. No. She started packing, movements mechanical. You have a new baby coming. A real one, real Helena. Real wife. What we have is real. Is it? She spun on him. Then choose. Me or her. That's not fair. If she's carrying my child. Choose Darian. Stay with me, grieve our daughter, build a life together. Or go be with her and your new baby. I can't abandon my child. But you can abandon me? I'm not abandoning you. But I have to be responsible. I have to be present for her. For them. Helena laughed bitterly. It was never about me, was it? Always about the baby. The heir. The legacy. That's not true. It is. You kept me here for the baby. Fell for me because of the baby. And now that there's no baby, you're already moving on to the next one. Helena, please. I love you. But not enough to choose me. She zipped her suitcase. Not enough to say, I'll pay child support but my life is with Helena. Not enough to put us first. There is no us without the baby. You said it yourself, you're only here because of the pregnancy. The words hung between them like a death sentence. You're right, Helena said quietly. There is no us without a baby. So I'll go. Helena, wait. But she was already leaving, walking out of his perfect house with her broken heart and empty womb, leaving him to his ex-wife and new baby and the life he'd chosen over her. Smash that like button if you are enjoying this story. Subscribe right now to know what happens next. The bus station at midnight was no place for a grieving woman. Helena sat on a cold bench, waiting for the next bus to anywhere but here, when the world started spinning. Miss? Miss, are you all right? The voice was familiar but wrong. Like Darian's but warmer, without the edge of command. She looked up into concerned gray eyes, cold eyes, but in a kinder face. Marcus. Helena. Darian's cousin, the doctor who'd walked away from the family business to heal instead of destroy. What are you doing here? You look. The world tilted. Her vision grayed. The last thing she heard was Marcus calling for help as she collapsed. She woke in a hospital room, different from the one where she'd lost her baby. Marcus sat beside her bed, reading her chart. "Welcome back," he said gently. "You gave me quite a scare. What happened?" "You fainted. Dehydration, exhaustion, low blood pressure." He paused. "And pregnancy?" "No." The word came out harsh. "I lost the baby." Dr. Patterson confirmed. "Helena." Marcus showed her the ultrasound. "You were carrying triplets. You lost one, but two survived. Twins. They're still there, still growing." She stared at the screen. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny forms. But Dr. Patterson said, "Vanishing triplet syndrome. One fetus is absorbed while the others survive. In the trauma of losing one, he missed the other 2. Marcus squeezed her hand. "You're still pregnant, Helena. 16 weeks with twins." "Oh my God." She pressed both hands to her stomach. "My babies. I still have my babies." "Does Darian know?" Reality crashed back. Darian, who'd chosen Renee, who was having a baby with his ex-wife. No. And he can't know. Helena? He made his choice, Marcus. He's with Renee. They're having a baby. A planned baby, a wanted baby. Tears streamed down her face. These babies, they'd just be complications. Reminders of the surrogate he used to know. That's not true. You weren't there. You didn't see how quickly he chose her over me. She gripped his hand. Promise me. Promise you won't tell him. Marcus studied her for a long moment. He'd loved her since the first time Darian brought her to a family dinner, this bright, warm woman who'd made his cold cousin smile. Now she was broken, pregnant, and alone. "I promise," he said finally. "But Helena, you can't do this alone." "I have to." "No." He made a decision that would change everything. "You don't." "I'm taking a position at Seattle General. Come with me. I'll help you. No strings, no expectations. Just, let me help." "Why would you do that?" "Because you deserve better than being someone's second choice. Because those babies deserve a chance. Because..." He smiled sadly. "Because sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into." Helena looked at this kind man offering her sanctuary. Not love, her heart was too shattered for that. But safety, support, a fresh start. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They left that night for Seattle. Helena left no forwarding address, changed her number, disappeared into a new life. She grew round with twins while Darian grew hollow with regret. Because a month after she left, he discovered the truth. Renee's pregnancy was fake. Hormone shots to simulate symptoms. A cousin's ultrasound passed off as hers. An elaborate lie to win him back. By then Helena was gone. His investigators found nothing. She'd vanished like smoke, taking with her any chance at redemption. 3 years passed. Helena raised beautiful twins, Lucas and Lily, with Marcus's help. He'd been there for every milestone, loving them like his own, loving her patiently while her heart slowly healed. Darian built his empire larger, dated women who weren't Helena, and wondered every day where she was. Until the Cole family reunion, when fate decided 3 years was enough punishment. "Uncle Marcus, push me higher." Lucas's delighted squeals filled the Cole estate's garden as Marcus pushed him on the old oak tree swing. The Cole family reunion was in full swing. 50 relatives pretending they liked each other for one afternoon a year. "My turn. My turn." Lily demanded, tugging on Marcus's shirt with Helena's determination and someone else's gray eyes. 5 more pushes for Lucas, then you, princess," Marcus promised. Helena watched from the patio, radiant in a sundress that showed off her engagement ring. A modest diamond, nothing like the rocks Darian used to buy, but it meant everything because Marcus had saved for 6 months to afford it. "They're beautiful children," Victoria Cole observed, appearing beside her with champagne. "Marcus is wonderful with them." "He's been their father in every way that matters," Helena said softly. "We're lucky to have him." "Indeed. Much better than their biological father, whoever he was. To abandon such angels." Victoria shook her head. "Marcus says he was never in the picture?" "Never," Helena lied smoothly. 3 years of practice made it easy. "Well, his loss. You make a lovely family. When's the wedding?" "October. Something small, just close friends and..." "Helena." The voice froze her blood. She turned slowly to find Darian standing 10 feet away, looking like he'd seen a ghost. 3 years had sharpened his edges, added silver to his temples, But those eyes that Lucas had inherited, were exactly the same. Darian. She forced calm into her voice. Hello. You're here. You're. His gaze swept over her, taking in the ring, the sundress, the glow of happiness. You're with Marcus. For 2 years now. Marcus appeared, carrying Lily on his shoulders while Lucas held his hand. Darian. Good to see you. But Darian wasn't looking at his cousin. He was staring at the twins. At Lucas, who had his exact eyes, his stubborn chin, his analytical stare. At Lily, who had his coloring but Helena's warm spirit. These are. His voice failed. My children, Helena said firmly. Lucas and Lily. They'll be 3 in September. Darian's face went white as he did the math. 3 in September. Which meant conceived in December, he said roughly, turning and walking away. Mommy, why is that man sad? Lily asked from Marcus's shoulders. I don't know, baby. Some people just carry sadness with them. That evening, Helena found Darian alone by the lake, staring at the water like it held answers. They're mine. Not a question. No, Helena said quietly. They're Marcus's. He's raised them, loved them, been there for every fever and nightmare and first word. But biology doesn't make a father. Choices do. And you chose Renee. I chose wrong. He turned to her, 3 years of regret etched on his face. She lied. The pregnancy was fake. All of it was a scheme too. I know. Helena's voice held no satisfaction. Marcus told me. But by then I'd built a new life. A better life. With my cousin. With a man who chose us first. Always first. She twisted her engagement ring. He knew about the twins from day one. Held my hand through morning sickness and midnight feedings. Never once made us feel like obligations or complications. Is that what you think you were to me? That's what you showed me when you chose her. Helena sat on a bench, suddenly tired. When you said you had to be responsible for her pregnancy instead of fighting for us. If I'd known about the twins. You'd have what? Demanded custody? Drawn up contracts? Made us live in separate wings? She shook her head. Darian, you only wanted me for the baby. When I lost hope, you were already pulling away. That's not true. Then why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you say, I'll support the child but I choose Helena? Tears she'd thought long dried came fresh. Because I wasn't enough without a baby. And now Marcus loves me, just me, even though the twins aren't his. Does he know? About me? Of course he knows. We don't have secrets. She stood. But Lucas and Lily don't. They think their biological father died before they were born. It's kinder than the truth. Which is? That he was alive but chose someone else. She started walking away, then paused. Be happy, Darian. Find someone to love. Have babies with them. But leave us alone. We're not yours anymore. The wedding was perfect. October in Seattle, leaves falling like blessings, Helena glowing in simple ivory while the twins scattered rose petals as flower children. Darian sat in the back row. He'd shown up uninvited, unable to stay away, watching another man marry the love of his life and claim his children. If anyone objects to this union, the officiant said, speak now or forever hold your peace. The church held its breath. Helena's eyes found Darian's, a silent plea and warning combined. He said nothing. What could he say? Those are my children? I loved her first? I choose her now, 3 years too late? Do you, Marcus, take Helena to be your wife? To love and cherish in sickness and health? I do. Marcus's voice was strong, sure. Everything Darian's had never been. Do you, Helena, take Marcus to be your husband? Pause. A heartbeat where she looked at Darian one last time. Then, I do. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus kissed her like she was precious. The twins cheered. The congregation applauded. And Darian sat alone, watching his cousin live the life he'd thrown away. At the reception, Lucas approached him. Are you sad because you don't have anyone to dance with? Christ, the boy was perceptive. Something like that. You can dance with my mommy. Daddy won't mind. He shares good. Your daddy's a good man. The best. Lucas grinned. He teaches me soccer and reads stories with voices and never gets mad when I ask too many questions. Each word was a knife. All the things Darian could have been, should have been, but wasn't. Lucas. Lily ran over. Daddy says we can have 2 pieces of cake. Awesome. Lucas grabbed his sister's hand. Come on. They ran off together, leaving Darian alone with his champagne and regrets. Their beautiful children. Renee appeared beside him, older and humbled by scandal. They have your eyes. What are you doing here? Marcus invited me. We've been in therapy. Working through what I did. She touched his arm. I'm sorry, Darian. For all of it. The lies, the manipulation, the lost years. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? You're sitting here watching another man raise your children because of my schemes. No. Darian's voice was firm. I'm watching another man raise his children. Because when it mattered, when Helena needed me to choose her over you, I chose wrong. That's on me, not you. You could fight for them. And destroy their happiness? Confuse the twins? Hurt Marcus, who's been nothing but a good father? He shook his head. Love isn't possession, Renee. We both learned that too late. Helena and Marcus danced past, lost in each other. The twins joined them, creating a family circle that had no room for outsiders. Besides, Darian continued, look at them. They're happy. Complete. Well, what more could I give them except complications? Later, Helena found him on the terrace, preparing to leave. Thank you, she said quietly, for not making a scene. I'm trying to learn when to let go. He studied her face. Are you happy? Truly? Yes. No hesitation. Marcus he's everything I needed. Patient. Present. Choosing us every single day. I could have been that. Could you? She asked gently. Or would there always have been another Renee, another crisis, another choice where we came second? He had no answer. They both knew the truth. I should go, he said finally. Darian, wait. She pulled out an envelope. School photos. Of the twins. I thought, maybe you'd want them. He took them with shaking hands. Professional photos of his children smiling at a camera, wearing uniforms from a school he'd never visit, living a life he'd never share. Thank you, he managed. They're happy, she said softly. That's all that matters. She left him there with photographs and might have beans. Inside, music played and his family celebrated. Outside, Darian Cole learned the hardest lesson of his life. Sometimes love means watching from afar. Sometimes the best father is the one who shows up, not the one who shares DNA. And sometimes, your greatest punishment is seeing exactly what your choices cost you. Do you think Helena should have forgiven Darian? Or was she right to marry Marcus, who chose her first? Comment below, Team Darian or Team Marcus? Should she have told the twins the truth? Or was protecting their happiness more important? Hit that like button if this story broke your heart. Because sometimes the person who loves you first isn't the person who loves you best. And sometimes second chances come with different people. Subscribe for more stories and share this with someone who needs to remember that choosing yourself is sometimes the bravest choice of all. Millionaire CEO comforts crying child at a wedding, stunned when he sees the child's mother. Step away from my son. The words hit him like a physical blow. Jared Blake, billionaire CEO, master of boardrooms, man who commanded respect from world leaders, stood frozen as the woman he'd once loved more than life itself stared at him with a mixture of shock and protective fury. Naomi? His voice cracked like a teenager's. The little boy looked between them, confused. Mommy, you know him? And in that moment, everything clicked. The familiar eyes. The way the child had trusted him so easily. The reason this 5-year-old felt like looking into a mirror of his own childhood photos. He's mine, isn't he? Jared whispered, his billion-dollar empire suddenly meaning nothing compared to this revelation. Naomi's silence was his answer. Welcome to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where stories come alive and hearts connect. If you're new here, I'm Mr. Ashbourne, and I bring you the most incredible stories every week. To my incredible subscribers, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support means everything, and today's story is one that will stay with you long after you finish watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button with notifications on and join our storytelling family. Now, let's get back to the story. Jared Blake adjusted his Armani cufflinks for the third time in 10 minutes. The wedding reception swirled around him like a tornado of laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations he had no interest in joining. He checked his Patek Philippe watch, 4:47 p.m. He'd calculated he needed to stay exactly 37 more minutes to fulfill his social obligation to Marcus, his old college roommate. Show face, congratulate the groom, maybe make small talk about quarterly projections with a few fellow CEOs, then escape back to his penthouse where silence was golden and emotions were locked away in a vault he'd built years ago. Jared. There you are, man. Marcus appeared beside him, slightly tipsy and radiating the kind of happiness that made Jared's chest tighten with something he refused to name. I can't believe you actually came. Sarah and I were taking bets. I said I would. Jared's smile was perfectly practiced. The one that had closed million-dollar deals and fooled board members into thinking he was genuinely interested in their weekend golf stories. You know, you should try this thing called fun sometime. It's really catching on. Marcus gestured toward the dance floor where couples swayed to a jazz quartet. There are some beautiful single women here. My cousin Rebecca is. I'm good, thanks. Jared's tone was polite but final. He'd learned years ago that relationships were just another form of business partnership, and he'd had enough failed mergers to know he wasn't built for the long-term contracts that came with love. Marcus studied his face with the persistence of someone who'd known him since they were 18 and stupid. You know, college Jared would have been the first one on that dance floor. What happened to that guy? He got successful. The words came out sharper than intended. Jared immediately softened his voice. I'm happy for you, Marcus. Really. But this isn't my scene. It used to be. Before Jared could respond, Marcus was pulled away by his new bride, leaving him alone with that uncomfortable truth hanging in the air like smoke from a fire he'd thought he'd extinguished. The truth was, college Jared had been a different person entirely. He'd been the guy who believed in love stories and happy endings. The guy who'd spent entire nights talking about dreams and fears with someone who'd made him believe he could have both success and love. That was before he'd learned that love was a luxury he couldn't afford if he wanted to build an empire. The memory tried to surface, but Jared pushed it down with the same ruthless efficiency he used to suppress hostile takeovers. He'd become a master at compartmentalizing emotions, filing them away in mental folders labeled irrelevant and counterproductive. He was calculating his exit strategy when he heard it, a sound that cut through the wedding's joyful noise like a blade through silk. A child crying. Not the demanding wail of a toddler having a tantrum, but something softer, more heartbreaking. The kind of crying that spoke of genuine distress, not manipulation. Jared found himself scanning the crowd, his businessman's instinct for problem-solving kicking in despite himself. There, near the garden fountain, partially hidden by a spray of white roses and baby's breath, a little boy sat alone on the stone steps, his small frame shaking with quiet sobs. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, dressed in a tiny black tuxedo that was slightly too big, his bow tie askew. In his small hands, he clutched a deflated balloon that might have once been red but now hung limp and defeated. Jared's first instinct was to look for the child's parents. Someone should be handling this. Someone whose job it was to comfort crying children and know the right words to say. But as he watched, guest after guest walked by the boy without noticing. They were too caught up in their own conversations, their own joy, their own worlds to see a small person in distress. The boy wiped his nose on his sleeve and looked around with the lost expression of someone who'd been forgotten. Those eyes, dark brown, framed with impossibly long lashes, held a sadness that seemed far too mature for such a young face. Something in Jared's chest twisted. He tried to ignore it, tried to tell himself this wasn't his problem. He didn't know anything about children. He'd built his life specifically to avoid these kinds of messy, emotional situations. But the boy's quiet sobbing continued, and Jared found his feet moving before his brain could object. He approached slowly, the way he might approach a wounded animal, unsure and slightly terrified he'd make things worse. "Hey there," he said, his voice gentler than he'd used in years. He crouched down to the boy's level, his expensive suit forgotten as his knees touched the garden pavement. "You okay, buddy?" The boy looked up at him with those impossibly sad eyes. Up close, Jared could see the tear tracks on his cheeks, the way his lower lip trembled with the effort of trying to be brave. "My juice fell," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible above the wedding music. And I can't find my mommy." Jared felt something crack inside his chest. He pulled out his pocket square, silk, monogrammed, worth more than most people's weekly grocery budget, and gently offered it to the boy. "Here. I've spilled worse things on worse days, trust me." The boy took the silk square with small, careful fingers. "Thank you, mister. You're nice." "I'm Jared," he found himself saying. "What's your name?" "Eli." The boy wiped his eyes and looked at Jared with a trust that was both humbling and terrifying. "Are you a prince? You look like a prince." Despite everything, Jared almost smiled. "No, not a prince. Just someone who knows what it's like to feel lost sometimes." The words surprised him. He hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even realized he'd been thinking them. But sitting there with this small, vulnerable person, his usual armor of corporate speak seemed not just inappropriate but impossible. "Do you know where your mommy might be?" Toward the crowd, Jared asked. "She was talking to the pretty lady in the white dress. But then there were so many people and I got scared and I came here because it's quiet." Jared nodded, understanding completely. He'd come to the same spot for the same reason, to escape the overwhelming nature of other people's happiness. "Well, we'll find her," he said, surprised by his own certainty. "But first, how about we get you cleaned up? Can't have you meeting your mom looking like you've been in a fight with a balloon." Eli giggled, the first sound of joy Jared had heard from him. The balloon didn't fight back very hard. No, they rarely do. Terrible at self-defense, balloons. As Jared helped Eli straighten his bow tie and smooth down his curly hair, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The simple satisfaction of making someone else's day better without expecting anything in return. "There," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "Now you look like the prince." "We both look like princes," Eli said solemnly. "Like we're in the same kingdom." The words hit Jared harder than they should have. When was the last time he'd felt like he belonged to anything? When had he last felt part of someone else's story rather than the isolated protagonist of his own? "Eli? Baby, where are you?" The voice cut through the garden like a prayer answered. Female, breathless, edged with the kind of panic that only a mother's love could produce. "Eli? Oh God, please. That's my mommy." Eli jumped up, his face lighting up with pure joy. "Mommy? I'm here." Jared stood slowly, brushing off his knees, preparing to meet another grateful parent and accept their thanks before disappearing back into his carefully constructed solitude. But as the figure emerged from behind the rose bushes, as the voice became a face, as recognition hit him like a physical blow, the world stopped. Naomi Brooks stood frozen in the garden path, her eyes wide with disbelief. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, her dark hair now shorter, framing her face in a way that emphasized the high cheekbones and full lips that had haunted his dreams for 5 years. She wore a simple blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable, and her hands, those hands that had once traced his face in the darkness of their shared apartment, were trembling. "Jared." The word came out as barely a whisper. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the woman who had once been his entire world, the woman who had walked out of his life without explanation, taking his heart with her. "Mommy, this is my friend Jared." Eli ran to his mother, wrapping his small arms around her legs. "He helped me when I was sad and he gave me his fancy napkin and he said we look like princes." Naomi's eyes never left Jared's face. He could see the storm of emotions there, shock, fear, something that might have been longing quickly buried under protective instinct. "Eli, honey, go sit on the bench for a minute, okay? Mommy needs to talk to Jared." "But, please baby, just for a minute." Eli, sensing the tension in the air with the intuition children possess, nodded and skipped over to a nearby garden bench, still clutching Jared's monogrammed pocket square. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. 5 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of dreams that had died in the space between one day and the next. "You look good," Naomi said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "Success suits you. Don't." The word came out harsher than he intended. "Don't do that. Don't pretend this is just normal." "What do you want me to say, Jared? That seeing you here feels like being hit by lightning? That I've spent 5 years trying to forget you existed? You did a good job of it. Just disappeared. No note, no explanation, no goodbye." Naomi's composure cracked slightly. "I left because I had to." "Had to? Or wanted to?" "Had to," she repeated firmly. "You were never going to choose me over your empire. We both knew that." "That's not. Isn't it?" Her voice rose slightly, then she caught herself, glancing toward Eli to make sure he wasn't listening. "How many dinners did you miss? How many conversations did you cut short for a phone call? How many times did you promise to be present and then disappear into your office?" The accusations hit their mark because they were true. Every single one of them. "I was building something," he said quietly. "For us. For our future." "You were building a wall," she countered. "Between you and everyone who tried to love you." They stared at each other across the garden, the weight of their shared history making the air thick and difficult to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jared's voice was barely audible. "Tell you what?" But even as she asked, they both knew what he meant. Because now, looking at Eli, really looking at him, the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark hair, the same stubborn chin, the same way of tilting his head when he was thinking. "He's mine, isn't he?" The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Naomi's silence was answer enough. "How long have you known?" she asked finally. "Since the moment I saw his eyes. They're my eyes, Naomi. My father's eyes." Jared's voice was thick with emotion he couldn't hide. 5 years. You kept him from me for 5 years. I kept him safe. From what? From me? From the man you were becoming. The man who valued profit margins over people. The man who couldn't see past his own ambition to notice the woman who loved him was drowning. The truth was hitting them both like a tidal wave. Can you imagine discovering you're a father like this? Let me know in the comments what you think you would do in Jared's situation. Jared felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You didn't give me a choice. You had already made your choice, Jared. Every day, every missed dinner, every time you chose work over me, you were choosing. I just finally accepted what you were choosing. That's not fair. Fair? Naomi's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? I spent 2 years watching you disappear into your company. 2 years trying to reach a man who was becoming a stranger. And when I finally realized I was pregnant, I had to face the reality that you were never going to be the father this child needed. You don't know that. Jared closed his eyes, remembering. Those last months had been a blur of acquisition deals and merger negotiations. He'd been so close to the breakthrough that would establish his company as a major player. So close to proving that the kid from a broken home could build something that mattered. Don't I? When was the last time you spent a full day without checking your phone? When was the last time you had a conversation that wasn't about business? When was the last time you let yourself be vulnerable with another human being? The questions hit him like physical blows because he couldn't answer them. Because the truth was, he'd forgotten how to be human somewhere along the way to becoming successful. I could have learned, he said quietly. I could have tried. Could you? Her voice was gentler now, but no less devastating. Because the Jared I fell in love with was already disappearing. The Jared who used to read poetry to me, who used to dream about traveling the world, who used to believe that love was more important than money, he was doing it
Where
for
was
them,
he those last
for
few
their
months?
future. But somewhere along the way, the future had become more important than the present. The goal had become more important than the journey. I was scared, he admitted, the words tasting foreign in his mouth. Scared of failing. Scared of not being enough. You were enough, Naomi said softly. You were more than enough. But you couldn't see it. Mommy? Eli's voice interrupted them. Are you sad? Naomi wiped her eyes quickly. No, baby. Just remembering something. Eli hopped off the bench and walked over to them, his small hand slipping into Jared's with a trust that made Jared's chest tight. Mr. Jared, do you want to come eat cake with us? The cake is really big and it has flowers on it. Jared looked down at the boy, his son, and felt something shift inside him. Something that had been locked away for so long he'd forgotten it existed. He looked at Naomi, searching her face for permission, for hope, for anything that might suggest this nightmare could become something else. Please? Eli squeezed his hand. I like you. You're nice to me. The simple words broke something inside Jared. When was the last time someone had liked him just for being kind? When was the last time someone had wanted his company for no other reason than they enjoyed being with him? Naomi, he said quietly, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I know I made choices that hurt you. But please, let me try. Not as the CEO and not as the man who built an empire, but as his father. As someone who wants to do better. Naomi studied his face, and for a moment, Jared saw a flicker of the woman who had once believed in him. The woman who had seen potential in him that he'd forgotten existed. You hurt me, she said finally. You hurt me more than I thought it was possible to be hurt. I know. And I won't let you hurt him. I know. If you do this, if you want to be part of his life, it can't be halfway. It can't be when it's convenient for you or when it fits into your schedule. It has to be real. Jared knelt down so he was at eye level with Eli. Hey buddy, would you like it if I came around sometimes? Maybe we could play together or read stories or just talk. Eli's face lit up like sunrise. Yes. Can we play pirates? I have a really good sword at home. I don't know much about being a pirate, Jared admitted. But I'd like to learn. I can teach you, Eli said seriously. It's not too hard. You just have to say, ahoy, a lot and pretend you have a beard. For the first time in 5 years, Jared laughed. Really laughed. The sound surprised him, rusty and genuine and completely uncontrolled. Ahoy, Captain Eli, he said solemnly. Ahoy, Mr. Jared. Naomi watched this exchange with tears in her eyes, and when Jared looked up at her, he saw something he hadn't dared hope for, forgiveness. Not complete, not unconditional, but a beginning. The cake really is good, she said quietly. And he's been talking about it for the last 20 minutes. Then we should probably go have some cake, Jared said, standing up but keeping hold of Eli's hand. Before Captain Eli here makes us walk the plank. As they walked back toward the reception, Eli chattering excitedly about pirates and cake and whether Jared knew any good pirate songs, Jared felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The wedding reception had continued around them, but as Jared sat at a small table with Naomi and Eli, sharing a slice of vanilla cake that was probably the best thing he'd tasted in years, he realized that everything had changed. Not just the situation, though discovering he was a father was certainly life-altering, but him. Something inside him that had been frozen for years was starting to thaw. "Mr. Jared," Eli said, his mouth full of frosting, "do you have a little boy?" The question was innocent, but it hit Jared like a physical blow. Well, I didn't know I did. But it looks like I do now. Is it me?" Eli's eyes were wide with hope. Jared looked at Naomi, who nodded slightly. "Yeah, buddy. It's you. So you're my daddy?" The word daddy nearly undid him. He'd been called a lot of things, "CO sir, Mr. Blake," even ruthless bastard, in a few particularly heated board meetings, but never daddy. Yes. I'm your daddy." Eli launched himself from his chair and into Jared's arms with the abandon that only children possess. "I always wanted a daddy. Mommy said maybe someday I'd meet you, but I didn't know you'd be so nice." Over Eli's head, Jared met Naomi's eyes. She was crying now, openly, and he could see the years of struggle there, the loneliness of single motherhood, the weight of protecting her child from disappointment, the exhaustion of being everything to someone who deserved the world. "I'm sorry," he whispered to her. "I'm so sorry." "I know," she whispered back. "I can see it in your eyes. You're different. The same but different. Like you remembered who you used to be." And that was it, exactly. Sitting there with his son in his arms and the woman he'd never stopped loving across from him, Jared felt like he was remembering himself. The man he'd been before fear and ambition had built walls around his heart. The man who'd once believed that love was the most important thing in the world. "Dance with me," Eli said suddenly. "I don't think I know how to dance with a 5-year-old, Jared admitted. "I'll show you. You just put me on your shoulders and spin around." Before Jared could object, Eli was climbing onto his shoulders with the fearlessness of youth. And suddenly, Jared was spinning on the dance floor of his college friend's wedding, his son laughing with pure joy above him, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this happy. He caught glimpses of the other wedding guests watching them, some with confusion, others with delight. Marcus appeared beside him at one point, his face split by a grin. "Now this is the Jared I remember," Marcus said. "Who's the little guy?" "This is my son," Jared said, the words feeling surreal but right. "Eli. Your son?" "Jared, you never said." "I just found out." Marcus's eyes widened, but before he could ask more questions, Eli was demanding to be spun again, and Jared was happy to oblige. For the next hour he did things he'd never imagined doing. He played peekaboo with a 5-year-old. He listened to endless stories about pirates and superheroes and the neighbor's cat who might be magic. He answered questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether rich people had to eat vegetables. And through it all, he felt the ice around his heart continuing to melt. "You're good with him," Naomi said during a quiet moment while Eli was off showing his new friend the wedding cake's elaborate decorations. "I don't know what I'm doing," Jared admitted. "I don't know the first thing about being a father. None of us do at first. But you're patient with him. You listen to him. You treat him like a person, not just a small inconvenience. He's incredible. How did you do this alone?" Naomi's smile was tired but proud. "You do what you have to do. You love them so much that everything else becomes background noise. I want to help. I want to be part of this. I know. And I want to believe you. But Jared, this isn't a business deal. You can't just decide to be a father when it's convenient and then disappear when work gets busy." Because the man I knew 5 years ago would have already checked his phone 3 times and made 2 business calls. Jared realized with a start that she was right. His phone had been buzzing in his pocket for the last hour, and he hadn't even thought about checking it. There were probably emails from Tokyo, calls from investors, updates on the European markets. And for the first time in his adult life he didn't care. "My phone is in my pocket," he said quietly. "It's been ringing for an hour. I haven't looked at it once." Naomi's eyes widened slightly. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm feeling different. Like I've been walking around half alive for years and didn't even know it." "That's what love does," she said softly. "It makes you more yourself than you ever thought possible." "I loved you," he said suddenly. "I want you to know that. I loved you so much it terrified me." "I know. I loved you too. But love isn't enough if you can't be present for it. I'm here now. For today." But what about tomorrow? What about next week when you have a board meeting and a conference call with investors and a presentation to the Tokyo office? Jared thought about his calendar, packed with meetings that had seemed crucial this morning but now felt like elaborate games played by people who had forgotten what actually mattered. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know how to balance it all. But I know I want to try. I know that sitting here with you and Eli is the most important thing I've done in years. Mommy, Daddy, come see. Eli's voice interrupted them. The cake has lights in it. Daddy. The word hit Jared like a revelation every time. They walked over to where Eli was pointing excitedly at the wedding cake sparkler candles. In the fading evening light, the tiny sparks looked like stars. It's magic, Eli whispered seriously. Real magic. You know what? Jared said, lifting Eli up so he could see better. I think you're right. And as he stood there, his son in his arms, Naomi beside him, watching fireworks dance on a wedding cake, Jared thought that maybe Eli was more right than he knew. Maybe this was magic. The kind that transformed cold, ambitious men into fathers. The kind that took broken hearts and made them whole again. The kind that reminded you that all the success in the world meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. I love you, Daddy, Eli said sleepily, his head resting on Jared's shoulder. I love you too, son, Jared replied, the words feeling like the most important business deal he'd ever closed. Over Eli's head, he met Naomi's eyes. She was crying again, but this time he thought they might be happy tears. We have a lot to figure out, she said quietly. We do. It's going to be complicated. Probably. You're going to have to change. Really change. I know. And I'm going to have to learn to trust you again. I'll earn it, he said simply. However long it takes. She studied his face in the twilight, and he could see her weighing his words, measuring them against years of disappointment and broken promises. Okay, she said finally. We can try. And that's how a wedding that Jared Blake almost skipped became the most important day of his life. Sometimes the moments that change everything come when we least expect them, disguised as ordinary encounters with extraordinary people. As the evening wound down and the wedding guests began to disperse, Jared found himself reluctant to leave. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's meetings or next quarter's projections. He was thinking about bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes and teaching his son how to ride a bike. We should probably get going, Naomi said as Eli dozed against Jared's shoulder. Someone has school tomorrow. Can I see you again? Both of you? You can call me, she said, pulling out her phone. We can start slow. Maybe coffee sometime this week? I'd like that. As they exchanged numbers, Jared felt like he was negotiating the most important contract of his life. Not because of the legal implications or the financial stakes, but because everything that mattered was hanging in the balance. Jared. Naomi's voice was soft as they walked toward the parking lot. What you did tonight, the way you were with Eli, that's the man I fell in love with. I'd forgotten he existed. So had I, Jared admitted. But I remember now. Good. Because that's the only man I want around my son. Our son, Jared corrected gently. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her all evening. Our son. As he watched them drive away, Eli's small hand waving from the back window, Jared felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope. Not the calculating hope of a businessman who'd identified a profitable opportunity, but the pure, terrifying hope of a man who'd been given a second chance at the only thing that really mattered. His phone buzzed with another ignored call, another urgent email, another crisis that couldn't wait until tomorrow. For the first time in his adult life, Jared Blake turned off his phone and went home to think about the future he actually wanted to build. The next morning he would wake up and make the first of many changes. He would delegate more, trust his team more, and remember that a company was just a collection of people working together, not a monument to his own ambition. He would learn to say no to meetings that didn't matter and yes to moments that did. He would discover that being a father wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present. And he would find that the most successful day of his life wasn't the day he made his first million or his first billion, or the day he was featured on the cover of Forbes. It was the day he learned that sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as ordinary moments. A crying child, a chance encounter, a conversation that changes everything. Because in the end, success isn't measured by what you build. It's measured by what you become. And Jared Blake was finally becoming the man he was always meant to be. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that it's never too late to choose love over ambition, presence over productivity, and people over profit. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective. Remember, the most important moments in your life might be waiting for you in the most unexpected places. Thank you for watching Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narrative. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the magic of second chances.